How you guys doing today? We did it. We've done it yet again. Here we go. We're streaming. We're streaming. Today's day brought to you by the letter me. What a great day I had today, honestly. I literally woke up, just took care of some daily stuff, and then had a really good conversation with my dad. My dad's living out in Manitoba. I've been trying to get in contact with him for a long time, but I've been so bloody busy and just missed connections and all this, but end up having a 4-hour conversation with my dad today. So that's basically what I did today. And then go out and do the clip and all the stuff you got to do, right? Went and got myself a cheese pizza. Yeah, cheese pizza. So I'm doing pretty well. Although I gotta admit, I am now I've got that pizza grogginess. You know what I'm talking about? A little bit of that going on. A little bit of that going on. Good day overall, though. Can't complain. People are still recovering from the snowstorm that happened a couple of days ago. Many of the cars out in the parking lot that is just right out there still covered. First, just JC right in the door. Good to see you, JC. Good to see you. Really had a beautiful day today, and took a look at. Sometimes I don't know what to talk about on the daily walkabout, and so I just took a look at what was streaming, and I saw the Russian-Ukrainian situation, how we're all the Russians are going to be invading Ukraine any moment, and I'm I've always known that that's total fucking bullshit. The 2014 coup that occurred in Ukraine, it just seems like nobody knows about it. And the moment you realize that we went in and we overthrew the government of Ukraine, installed our own leadership, you realize instantly it's it's the same narrative as has happened in South America. It's the same thing that's happened throughout the Middle East. And in 5-10 years time, suddenly we'll all be talking about the Azov battalion, they're the real problem, we got to go into that region to deal with the Azov battalion. And it's you mean the neo-Nazi organization that you yourselves funded? It's totally US, it's the playbook, man. And then suddenly there's going to be some major event that occurs in America, let's say, I don't know, 9/11, right? Osama bin Laden was a CIA spook. He was funded by the CIA, and then he went rogue. And it's what do you think we're setting ourselves up for here, right? And these neo-Nazis are turning around and talking to people in America, which then lets the Biden administration turn around and create legislation in order to combat white supremacy domestically, but the Americans are the ones that are funding the Nazis in Ukraine in the first place. So it's it's so fucking dumb. It's so fucking dumb. And it really just comes back onto one of my major central theses about our society, which is maybe we should just stop. Huh? What do you think? Yeah, this Seinfeld meme is making the rounds. It's the reason why I used it, because I was I've been seeing this Seinfeld meme all over the place now, and so I'm just yeah, here we go. I'm topical. I'm in the loop. I'm hip with what the kids are saying these days. I'm down with the jive, groovy cats. Yeah, so, I don't know. Beautiful day. Having a good one. What a wonky, weird, strange life we're all in, eh? You ever think this? You ever stop and you're just what in the hell is any of this? What are we even doing? What's the point of this place? We're completely temporal. We don't know why we're here. We're just here. And it seems instead of making this place cool or chill or relaxing or even interesting, right? We're just how can we be as annoyingly boring as possible? Here's a digital playground for you to play in. It's well, what about why are we making outside so stupid and shitty, right? Like, I remember, like, not that long ago, I really thought to myself, like, why don't we have jungle gyms everywhere? Like, why can't I go to a park and there's literally an adult-sized jungle gym and I can go play on the jungle gym? I would love that shit. Are you kidding me? Just, like, being able to, like, go be a fucking monkey, like, and just, like, scramble over stuff and all this. And the argument of, like, well, what happens if a kid goes on it and that falls down and hurts themselves? I'm like, well, then they've learned a lesson, haven't they? Like, I don't know why we're so, like, weak. Like, we're so weak as a people and fragile. Like, we can't have, like, adult conversations, and we can't, like, structure the world to be adult. Like, everything is... It really is, like, we've made an outdoors that's supposed to be, like, for babies. And you're like, well, where do the adults even go to be adults and, like, do adult things? And, oh, you gotta go to some greasy, disgusting, like, hole-in-the-wall place where you spend, like, $150 in order to even get in the door. And then you can, like, be an adult with other adults who also would like to be adults. And you're like it's lame. Like, this whole place is fucking lame, and, like, no wonder people are getting upset with it, right? The meaning of life equals sample size of 1. We can choose for ourselves or allow others to chew for us. 42. Under capitalism, you get the innovation of 2 competing firms wasting twice as many resources to create the same highly priced, low-quality product. Or you get a company that monopolizes a resource that is otherwise free, right? Or putting a gateway on something that should be widespread and available for everybody, right? Like, we've all heard these stories of, like, how capitalists wouldn't move forward with, like, solar energy, or, like, talking to, like, Tesla, being like, no, we're not going to move forward with this technology because you're creating a technology that can't be metered, right? And if you can't meter it, right, if you can't force yourself in between and wedge yourself in and be a worthless parasite that sucks up all the energy or sucks up wealth for no reason other than your existence, then they're not going to create that technology. Like, in my view, that's the reason solar energy and solar power has been so slow to be developed, because once solar energy is created, like, once a person has a solar panel and a battery to go with it, right, you can't meter it anymore. And in fact, the person who has the panel can actually sell energy back to the grid, right? This is the opposite of what capitalism wants. Capitalism wants to wedge itself between the people who generate the energy and the people who use the energy, right? They don't want to do any work. They don't want to do any labor. They just want to siphon as much. We need a Dexter for the owner class. Oh, yeah. I mean, not in terms of Dexter. I actually do think that you could make a very successful television show that is literally like a group of people going around killing billionaires. And, like, literally you could call it Kill Billionaires, right? And it would just be like, you could straight up just, like, rip Kill Bill, right? Just rip, like, what Quentin Tarantino is doing. But make it, like, introduce the billionaire, here's why he sucks, let's go kill him, we kill him. And that's, like, literally every episode. And you could make a show like that, and I think it would be extremely successful. Like, we love heist movies, right? Like, we love heist movies. Even if the protagonists are, like, shitty. Like, even if they're not, like, good people. We still love heist movies. We love watching people organize and then execute a robbery, right? And the problem with heist movies, in my view, is that there's always some twist that we the audience were not let in on, right? And we're always like, oh no, they're not. It's not going to happen. But then we find out that it was the plan all along. And you can kind of just make it whatever, and so it ends up being, like, not real, like, the tension isn't real, which is annoying. But good to see you too, Alex. But I do think, like, you could make a show, just make a heist show that is, but instead of it being them robbing the billionaire, they kill the billionaire. right? I think the same way about Superman, right? That for whatever reason, I find myself working on a Superman script. I don't know why I do this, guys. I made a Jafar script. I made a script for the character from Disney's Aladdin called Jafar, and I don't know why. And now I'm working on a Superman script, and I don't know why. I'm just doing it because it's like in my head, and I'm like, yeah, this would be a kick-ass Superman script, and I think part of the reason why is because I want the challenge, because I've been seeing a lot of people saying that, like, yeah, people are struggling with a good Superman script. They don't know how to write a good Superman script. And I'm literally sitting here being like, I know exactly I know exactly the story that would be an amazing Superman script. Basically what you do is you start the story with the death of Superman, right? And it's all like, he's Superman and everyone loves him. Like, forget about the origin story. We all know the origin story. And it's like the 80s, and it's Batman is there, and everybody's like big and powerful, and the glittering gold and all this stuff, and everyone's as good as they are, and they've just solved a problem, and then Doomsday shows up, and Superman fights Doomsday, but Doomsday can like actually like hurt Superman, and Doomsday's destroying everything, so Superman grabs him and flies up into space, and then throws Doomsday into space, and Doomsday goes, ah, and like flies in space. But Superman's wounds are so bad that he passes out, and then the moon comes, and Superman collides with the moon, but he's on the dark side of the moon, and so nobody knows where he is, and he can't get access to solar power, and so he's passed out on the dark side of the moon. And then 40 years pass, right? And some moon base gets built, right? Probably the Chinese, right? And they find Superman on the dark side of the moon. And so they bring him, and then he comes back. And then you've got a real fish out of water story, because he's been gone for 40 years. And the world that he was in is no longer there. And what is there, right? You've got an old, embittered Batman, right? And you've got Jeff Bezos. Like, let's be really clear who this is. Like, Jeff Bezos as Lex Luthor, who has essentially taken America over and operates a series of factories and all of this kind of stuff, and just suppresses everybody and dominates everybody. And Superman comes in, and he's like, well, I want to fix this. This is obviously bullshit. And Batman is like, it's all legal. Like, it's all legal. Like, you can't just go in there and punch him, dude. Like, you're the villain then. Because this is all being done through the legal system. Everyone's agreeing to this, right? And then it turns into like a real exploration by Superman, right? Of how do we fix this without violent force? And ultimately, it turns into Superman rallying people together and facing like media opposition, right? Like, imagine like Superman being censored, and Jeff Bezos, like Lex Luthor, trying to get Superman on side with him, right? Trying to convince him that this is good for America and for Americans, right? And ultimately, the whole thing finishes with Superman successfully rallying the population and defeating Lex Luthor and all of these people by political revolution. And I would call it Superman Uprising. That's my Superman script. I'm talking about writing a Superman script, and I don't know why. That's why. Anyway, and it's extremely telling to me that they can't write a good Superman script, because like the people who have power no longer know what truth, justice, or justice is. They've completely lost sight of what these ideas even are, right? And so they don't know how to tell a good Superman story. And they certainly don't want to villainize Bezos, right? They don't want to turn Bezos into a literal villain, even though he is a literal villain, right? Like, that's what's so weird, is that you don't need to write Lex Luthor. Like, he's right in front of you. Like, type Jeff Bezos, for God's sakes. Like, That's Lex Luthor. Like, right? Like, I'm not crazy here, right? And literally, you've got your character. He's like this completely narcissistic, self-interested person who's like literally shooting rockets into space for his own entertainment while destroying the entire planet. Like, perfect. It's perfect. You don't even need to write it. You don't even need to think. Like, that's why I'm so interested in writing the script, because it's like right there. Like, the character's just like, yeah. And every scene is just like, yeah, obviously. Like, obviously. Yeah, this is obviously how it would go. Right? So I just need to sit down and actually, like, hammer it out. And you get some really interesting and powerful scenes, I think, between Superman and Batman. Right? Because Batman is an interesting character in this conversation because he's simultaneously he's part of the corporate power structure, right? Bruce Wayne is part of the corporate power structure, but he's also like this vigilante. Have I read Superman Red Son? Yeah, I have. I think it was anti-Soviet propaganda, basically. Like, oh, Superman was raised by a Soviet, and so he's like a domineering dictator. It's like, yeah, okay, bud, of course. Like, I can see the reactionary nerds like the Quarter Pounder getting their panties in a bunch over this. Yeah, good. No, if the reactionaries are angry, then then you've done it right. I'm really worried seeing what's going on with NATO right now. Yeah, of course. We do not need World War III. Well, they're not going to actually do like an invasion. They don't want a conflict. Yeah, of course they misinterpret the whole thing. Yeah, obviously. No, I mean, they obviously will. 2022 should be the year that the left-wing wins elections, starting with Barbados tomorrow, then all the way through Europe and Canada. I mean, it's happening throughout South America. Like, that's happening throughout South America for sure. Got any good movies to recommend recently? I still think Arcane is really good. Like, if you're just looking for something that's, like, not, like, heavy. Like, Don't Look Up was good, but it kind of hurts your heart. Arcane is just good. Like, it's just good, you know? Like, it's excellent storytelling. You're rooting for everybody, right? Like, the people who are presented to you who are, like, villains, you're still like, yeah, let's go, bro. Like, that's the real power of that movie, of that show, Arcane, is that no one is like the villain. Like, they're all each other's villains, but you're still rooting for everybody, and you still see everybody's perspective. It's really, really good. And so that's an easy recommend. Ain't gonna be World War III. The owner billionaire class own both countries. Yeah, there's that too. Dune. I'm waiting for the second movie. Right. I'm so mistrustful of these wealthy people. Right. I'm so mistrustful of the entertainment industry anymore that I like, nope. Until it's done. Like, until the thing is finished and it's presented in full, I'm not going to invest a moment. Because, for all we know, the second movie in the Dune franchise is just going to be a piece of shit. Right? Just like they did to Game of Thrones, right? Like, just like they do with everything. They literally, like, take your money, get you invested, and then tell you to fuck off. And totally betray you. Like they did with Star Wars, right? Arcane was pretty good, solid. Yeah, 8.5 out of 10. That's basically where I'd put it, too. Right? I could be convinced of like a 9 or a 9.5 even. A 10, what would take it into 10 territory? The only way it would go into 10 is if it was also simultaneously being like a social critique, which it kind of is, in a way, but you gotta find the social critique instead of it being like, anyway. Munich, The Edge of War. Okay, I haven't heard of Munich, The Edge of War. Okay. Let's get in. Let's do the number. Today's number. We've got enough people in chat. Today's number is, I am going with a 6. I'm feeling like a 6 today. Here we go.
Here we go for today's number. It's January 18, 2022.
We got a 6 from Ez, y'all.
10
7, of
balls.
course, from Buck. Good 9 from Major.
Each
Good to see you,
ball
Major.
has
Good to see
a
you.
number. Numbers 1 through 10. Swirl the numbers.
Here we go. Here we go.
Pick a number.
Get hype. We got only a 40% chance. All right, 50% chance.
Today's number is...
Here we go. 7. Mocked.
7.
Your consistency carries the day, Mocked. It's your day. You've got with you the Lynchian energy, the energy of the Fae. Do with it as you will. And usually now I go grab my guitar and I play a song, but unfortunately I broke a string. Haven't had the opportunity to go get a new set of strings. So, no music today. Oh, I know, Mr. Milo. I know. No music. So he's staring and whining. Let us pop in. What happened to the Twitter segment? Not on Twitter anymore? That didn't really... I am on Twitter, but I just, I'm not... It didn't really work out. Or I just kind of lost interest in it, honestly. Anyway. Omicron largely evades immunity from past infection or 2 vaccine doses. The new report from the Imperial College London COVID-19 response team estimates that the risk of reinfection with the Omicron variant is 5.4 times greater than that of the Delta variant. This implies that the protection against reinfection by Omicron afforded by past infection may be as low as 19%. Researchers estimate the growth and immune escape of the Omicron variant in England. They used data from the UKHSA and NHS for all PCR-confirmed SARS-CoV-2 cases in England who had taken a COVID test between November 29th and December 11th, 2021. Vince is giving us pushback. Vince is giving us pushback on the Imperial College. Oh, well, Vince, you've got strong opinions on the Imperial College, stronger than I've got, for sure. And this is what I am reporting, just what people are saying in this regard. I honestly don't. So, Professor Neil Ferguson from Imperial College London said this study provides further evidence of the very substantial extent to which Omicron can evade prior immunity given by both infection or vaccination. Pushback with Aaron Mattei, exactly. They pushed for immense lockdown, saying 10 to 20 million could die from COVID. They were wrong. I mean, I think initially it's tough, right? It's tough that I don't like doing this with the COVID conversation where it's like, they said a bunch of people were going to die and nobody died or any of that kind of stuff. Because I do think these people are taking the worst case scenarios, right? And that's always the case with they said a bunch of us were going to be we all locked down and it looked like it was for nothing. And it's yeah, but what happens if we don't lock down? And there are places that didn't, and we know what happened, right? And so, yeah, it's but in any case, right? These guys are actually doing studies and actually trying to figure something out, so I'm willing to record on it. Yeah, and everybody's still learning about these variants, and I'm pretty forgiving, honestly. I don't like this thing that happens, that you're seeing a lot now with Jimmy Dore, and you're seeing now with Joe Rogan, where there's a lot of aha-ism, right, in regards to this, where it's they said this, but actually, what happened was... And I'm just kind of dude, nobody knows what's going to happen. Nobody knows what's going to happen. I'm pretty forgiving. This is one of these cases where if even the experts are wrong, what hope had we, right? And they, the people who are studying it know more than we do about this, right? So, yeah, Ford is going to ease restrictions next week. Thoughts? I actually don't know what to think. I gotta be really honest, man. I don't know what to think. There comes a point where, I do have to start asking, seriously, what truly is the difference between Omicron or any of this, and like the flu? Like that's the real question I want answered. And I think if I could get that question answered, and I haven't found anything that actually makes a really strong comparison or really shows anything data-wise between, like, am I, where's my threat scale? I think that's really where I'm at, right? Where's my threat scale? Like, part of the issue that I'm facing with as a commentator and as a person is that I actually rather like being a hermit. I actually rather like being a person who lives alone, secluded, right? Like, I live in my little bubble, and I think I would like that anyway, right? I don't need Omicron to convince me to do that. And so, and like, I feel like I'm structuring my life so that that's the way it's gonna go for me. Like, if being this narrator, like if narrating novels and doing this YouTube channel, like if all of that kind of stuff pans out, then my life is gonna be like pretty secluded, and I like that. I'm a fan of that. So when I'm commenting on this, I'm not really commentating for my own personal safety, because I'm not like, all the restrictions are lifted. I'm like, oh, okay. Like, I don't think my life is going to change at all. Like, I think that my life is how it is, and this is the way I like it. But for people who like want to get out there and like build life and get the economy going and like all that kind of stuff, well, okay. So my question would be, where's the threat scale? Like, can I see a comparison between? Give me like any year, like 2010, right? Like before the pandemic, in 2010. Right? How bad was the flu in 2010? Like, what was the level and how many people died? Like, what are the numbers there? And then compare them to now with Omicron, right? And if Omicron, if it's at least the same, then I'm like, yeah, reopen, man. Like, we lived with the flu for decades and decades and decades. Like, there was a flu season, the flu was normal. Right? Like, if an 80-year-old died of the flu, you know, no one was like, this is a national tragedy, right? Like, it's a tragedy, sure, as life is, but like, it just seems to me like there is going to be a moment where if this Omicron COVID thing just kind of settles in and is of the same level as like the flu, well, then reopen, right? Like, it just seems, you know, normal to me, I guess. But again, like, I don't feel comfortable like planting a flag on it, because truthfully, like, on a very personal level, my life isn't going to change that much, open or no, right? I'm pretty happy with how things are going in terms of my own existence. So long as it all works out and I can get out of the capitalist scheme, you know? I still think Omicron is becoming a vaccine with super mild symptoms. I don't know. Just do not trust any conservative. Yeah, that's a fair thing to say. That, well, and I also feel like the level of pushback that our governments are giving against the anti-vax movement is getting a bit suspicious. Like, usually if things are like kooky conspiracy theories, they're just ignored, you know? But it's usually the movements that have a bit of credibility that get pushed against. So, anyway. I think you might like for one and then reinstate them. Counts go up, photo up. Yeah. Well, like, him going out with the shovel. Like, this is the funny thing about Doug Ford, right? So Doug Ford goes out in the middle of this snowstorm and is like saving people and like shoveling and like doing all that kind of stuff. And like, there's a whole group of people who are like, oh, isn't that nice of Ford to do? And I literally am like, this guy has control of the Ontarian economy, right? Like, he should be galvanizing resources in order to deal with this problem. He shouldn't be doing it himself, right? Like, it seems to me like, don't you think that the time he's spending driving around in his truck and shoveling could be better spent actually organizing his resources in order to actually do this, like, with other people? Like, wouldn't you think it was weird? Like, if you saw Jeff Bezos actually on the line in one of his factories, actually doing the work, you'd be like, weird. Like, isn't your role in this to be like the organizer? Isn't your role to be like the meta organizer? Right? Kind of odd, in fact, that he's gone off and done that. Omicron, basically the flu. It's a flu or the common cold, depends who you ask. I know someone who's only one dose got Omicron, said it was a flu. Maybe affects each different. I recently had a conversation with somebody who got COVID, and I don't know if it's Omicron, but they got COVID and it was serious. Like, they're walking around with a cane now. So, like, I don't know many people who got hit with the flu and at the age of like 29 and are now walking around with a cane. Yeah, we aren't at the end of the pandemic yet, so we don't really know what the final number. Yeah, especially most Western companies. Well, and honestly, most Western companies, like, we're going to just stop keeping track of it. Like, that's what happened with the Spanish influenza. Like, in the third wave, like, as we were going into the third wave, we just stopped. We just stopped tracking it. We were just like, and, like, moved on, right? And now we're, like, getting into the fifth, maybe sixth wave. We'll stop tracking it eventually. We'll just stop being like, just stop spending resources on that. Spend your resources somewhere else. About 36K people die per year from the flu. Yeah. Well, and that's just it. Like, it's just like if it has parity, right? Like, in 2010, I wasn't like running around being like, oh my God, right? Lockdown, you know? Yeah. The government-controlled producers of Breakfast TV deleted this video where host Sid Sicaro and Dana Pugliese give the thoughts on Doug Ford's fake photo op. Oh, interesting. Yeah. Yeah. And the only reason I bring this up is because there's new information coming out all the time, right? And the thing that I think is still... Like, I'm trying not to be a fearmonger. I'm trying to just report on the things that I'm finding that I think are based in evidence and what researchers are showing us. And the only thing that I can think of that is still, like, of a major concern for me is that this thing could mutate, right? Like, it's already mutated once in a very aggressive way. Like, when you really think about the mutation from the Delta variant to Omicron, it's a very aggressive mutation, right? It's a very aggressive change. That it changed from being like a certain level of transmissible to being 6 times more transmissible and evading the vaccine, right? Like, that's pretty aggressive. So what if it did that, but instead of it being its transmissibility, it was its deadliness, right? What if it went from the Delta variant to being 6 times deadlier, right? And, like, that kind of thing can still happen. It can still make that turn. It can still do that pivot. And that, to me, is the concern. So we'll see, because eventually there does come a point where you got to kind of just shrug and live and just, like, try to live your fucking life, right? And why are we, like... We can't just keep everything closed because there's the potential of that happening. You know what I mean? Like, we got to live our lives and make the best of it. But I'm still going to wear my mask. I haven't been sick since the start of this thing, right? And it's the mask. For sure it is. So, anyone seen Scream 5? Dude, by the time you get to the 5th installment in a franchise, it's always going to be mixed. Like, that's not a labor of love. That's not a labor of love. All right. Yet new academic study shows how a Canadian taxpayer group is fueling anti-Indigenous racism. Just when you thought we were getting ahead of it, right? Anti-Indigenous talking points have been creeping into Canadian media and public policy debates for nearly 2 decades, thanks to the work of a right-wing taxpayer group, a new academic study argues. The study, published by researchers at Simon Fraser University and the University of Alberta and first reported by Alberta Politics, looks at the key role political advocacy groups have played in shaping Indigenous settler relations. Yeah, look at this. And honestly, like, I feel like in the last couple of months, the Simon Fraser University is doing everything it can to regain its credibility, right? Like, these people are incredulous. Like, they're just brutal liars. Like literal ideologues. And recently I've been seeing them release some studies that are like, oh yeah, we can't just be like vicious, crazed liars. Like we actually have to report and on things truthfully from time to time. But the very fact that Simon Fraser Institute is connected to it makes me go like, okay, if you say so, bud. As a case study, the researchers focused on the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, a right-wing anti-tax group previously led by Alberta Premier Jason Kenney, and a favorite go-to source for quotes on tax issues for many corporate media outlets. Kyle Wilmot, an SFU sociology professor and one of the study's authors, said they focused on the CTF because they are regularly consulted as some kind of neutral group of taxpayers by the press. Their work gets picked up by so many in the political sphere, and I think it reinforces racists' ideas that were actively undermine Indigenous sovereignty, Wilmot told Press Progress. To conduct their analysis, the researchers identified 407 documents published between 1998 and 2019 on the CTF's website relating to Indigenous topics. Most documents, the study explains, were press releases, blog posts, reports and articles authored by the CTF published in publications like the Toronto Sun and Maclean's. The content analysis we conducted demonstrates the shape of how they have contributed to disinformation, ignorance, and policy debates that have undermined Indigenous sovereignty and nationhood and contributed to anti-Indigenous racism in everyday life. So, like, big fucking surprise, right? Rich people who want more money for themselves are also racists. Like, are we blown away by this? Right? Other major sub-themes related to secrecy suggest First Nations have no accountability infrastructure and allegations of corruption and malfeasance. But CTF's focus on this theme is a continuation of the use of accounting as a tool of delegitimization and dispossession, the study observes, noting these talking points are rooted in paternalistic tropes that present Canada as morally and fiscally generous to First Nations, while telling Indigenous peoples what is best. Yeah. That's classic, man. Like, these savages should be happy that we're, like, building houses for them. Like, oh, okay, buddy. You're going in and, like, telling these people how to live. Ugh. Like, even look at this, right? Hunger strike, you're doing it wrong. Like, as if you have a right to tell people how they can or cannot protest the government, right? Oh, we got new Canadian polling. Preferred Prime Minister polling, Justin Trudeau, 30%, Singh at 21%, O'Toole, 20%, Bernier, 6%. I think it's time for Cons to get a new leader. I'm surprised they didn't, right? It's a real testament to O'Toole's, like, it's clear that he's got some political savviness about him because he's managing to maintain his position within the party itself. Cons and NDP really need new leaders. Otherwise, Liberals are going to win, and that only makes things worse. Yeah. Paul Vier will be the new Cons leader eventually. I think you're right, Matthias. I think that he's very clever and astute, and he's very intelligently not forcing it, I think. I really do think that Paul Vier understands that he has to just play it slow, like slow as roll. Build his power, right? Don't turn it into a big conflict or contest. Make it an inevitability, right? Just steadily make it so that he becomes the obvious option. And I think that's the game he's playing. Like, he doesn't want to go in there and act like a white knight. He wants he wants the party itself to come to the conclusion that he's their leader, right? And I think that's what's going to happen. Because he's the one that, like, when I hear anybody speak in the Conservative Party, he's the one that sounds the best. He understands how to, and honestly, like, straight up, Pierre Poilievre understands how to lie the best. He's the best liar. Like, for sure. Like, he really understands that the way that you lie and the way a liar is effective is by telling 95% of the truth. And then right at the end of it, just do a little, like, right at the end, right? So walk people all the way to the truth, and then right at the end, twist it into them. And most people will just go along with you, right? And I've seen him do this over and over and over again, where he'll like, I listen to a speech of his, or I listen to a little thing of his, and I'm like, yeah, that's right, Pierre, absolutely, yep, for sure, completely, right? And then right at the end, I'm just like, okay, yeah, all right, whatever you say, Pierre, and that's why we need to cut taxes, and that's why we need to sacrifice everything to the death cult, right? Like he can take all of the left talking points, all of the leftist talking points, and then right at the end just do a little pivot and be like, and that's why corporate power is good, and that's why the billionaires need to be protected. And he's very savvy at it. He's very, very good, and I feel like that's going to make him a very effective leader of the conservatives. And I feel like it's going to, because Canadians love liars. Like, we love them. We love it when politicians stand up and bullshit us. We absolutely adore it. And Pierre's very good at it. And he looks good and he sounds good. And he'll be very effective at it. I'm sure of it. Parliament returns on the 31st. Wonder what the first QP of 2022 will look like. We'll see, man. It's going to be... We'll see what the NDP comes out. Because, like, if the NDP just decide to prop up the government, it'll be pretty boring. But it doesn't look like that's going to be the case. We'll see. Did I get the NDP link in chat? Probably. Which one are we talking about here? Not seeing it. Not seeing it. Unless it's in the live stream. All right. ndp.ca/team. What are you doing to me here, bud? ndp.ca/team. Your NDP team. Carol Hughes, Nikki Ashton. This is just like who the NDP are. Daniel Blake, critic, finance. I really like Matthew Green. Anytime I've seen Matthew Green stand up and talk. I also like Peter Julian a lot. He does good work. Although he doesn't like the camera. Like, he doesn't like the camera. It's pretty obvious. And that's going to be the thing that does him in. Charlie Angus, of course. Like, Charlie Angus is like a stalwart, right? He's great. Yeah. But there is no internal, like, they're running with Jagmeet. Like, there is no internal challenge right now to Jagmeet. And I really do think it's as simple as Jagmeet has cornered the market internally, right? The Sikh community is a powerful force within the NDP, and people are aware of it. And each individual one of these people don't have similar backing, right? They have the support of their constituents within their own riding, sure, but they likely don't have the power block necessary to actually challenge the leadership of Jagmeet Singh, right? Like, Jagmeet Singh has, like, the Sikh community loves this guy. Like, I talked to my brother who's in the NDP in Manitoba, and Jagmeet Singh visited, right? And when Jagmeet Singh showed up, the entire Sikh community came out, and they treated him like he was a fucking rock star, right? Like, none of these guys are getting that. Like, none of these guys are getting that. So, like, Jagmeet Singh's here. Like, he's it's going to take a major internal challenge to get rid of Jagmeet Singh. For better or for worse. For better or for worse, right? And you guys know my commentary on it, which is that Canadians are not going to vote for a man in a turban. We're not there. Like, we're not there. It's unfortunate. Like, it's deeply unfortunate that it is as childish as that. And it is childish, but that's what it is. No, get out of here. What? No. Oh, no. Oh, come on. I had a good... Oh, well. Yeah. Unfortunately, there's a lot of racists in Canada. Well, and it isn't even like the overt form of racism, right? Like, it's just that, like, It's like the most insidious, annoying version of racism. It's just like, oh, what's with the turban? Like, that's it. Ooh, what's with the turban? Like, it's not even like people who wear turbans are terrorists and they're gonna come in here and steal our jobs and we gotta do what we can to send them back to their own country and like that kind of racism. No, it's literally just like, what's with the turban? Like that. Yeah, imagine if they replaced Jugmeat with Andrew Horvath. Would that work? I don't know. No, that's not gonna happen, dude. Like, that's not gonna happen. So, this is from the Toronto Star. The economy no longer works for many Canadians, and business is largely to blame. This is by Frank Stonick. When something is not right, it might be in your personal life or at work, you should know that you've got a problem. If you don't know you've got a problem, then you've really got a problem. And problems are like cancer. If left unattended, they will grow. I like to think I'm a pretty good problem solver. That ability to identify and solve problems has certainly helped me over the course of my business career. When I started out in business, I opened my own one-man tool and die shop. I would hustle and go out knocking on doors looking for work. I would usually approach the foreman or manager of a business and ask them if they had any problems that needed fixing. Using this approach, I was able to drum up sales by promising my customers that I could solve their problems. I backed up my promise with an ironclad guarantee. If my customers were not satisfied, they wouldn't have to pay me. I started picking up more and more business along the way. I hired more employees, and the small business I started in a rented garage at the corner of Dufferin and DuPont streets ended up growing into Magna International Incorporated, one of the world's largest automotive parts suppliers, with 160,000 employees in nearly 30 countries and annual sales of $40 billion. That credo of solving problems for our customers became part of our corporate DNA, and we earned a hard-won reputation among the world's biggest car makers as the can-do auto parts supplier that could help them with any problem. When I look around today and reflect on what are the biggest problems confronting us, there is one issue that in my mind rises above all the others: the economy. The economy no longer works for the benefit of most people. And if the economy doesn't function, nothing else will. Without a strong economy, we won't be able to pay for social programs like health and education. And we won't be able to take care of our elderly, the frailest and most vulnerable among us, or the poor, or the homeless. What is most troubling about the failure of our economy is the great divide that now exists in terms of income. The rich are getting richer, the middle class is shrinking, and the poor among us are growing in number, with fewer opportunities to rise up out of poverty. Overall living standards for most Canadians are declining, and have been for several decades now. As a result, a growing number of people are struggling to make ends meet. In addition, more people are taking from the public purse in terms of subsidies, income supplements, and welfare, and fewer are contributing to it. You don't have to be a great economist to realize that a system like that can't go on forever. It's no wonder so many young people are disillusioned. The cost of a college or university education keeps climbing, but there are fewer and fewer good-paying jobs once students graduate. And no jobs means no hope. It's almost impossible now for a young couple starting out in life to buy a house, especially here in Toronto, or in many of Canada's larger cities. It's hardly surprising, therefore, that so many young people are turning to socialist policies and programs. I've spent most of my life building and managing businesses, but I'm the first to admit that business is largely to blame for the state of the economy. The plain truth is that business has failed to let workers get a fair share of the wealth they helped create. So how do we go about creating more jobs, especially during a time of intensified global economic competition and the increased outsourcing of manufacturing jobs to low-cost, low-wage countries? How do we create better-paying jobs that would give Canadians a higher standard of living? In the coming weeks and months, I'll share many of those solutions with you. I will not only address some of the biggest issues our society faces, everything from climate change and taxes, but I'll also put forward concrete, practical solutions based on 7 decades of experience as an entrepreneur, a philanthropist, and a politician. You may not agree with them, but they will certainly provoke your mind. So, the reason I wanted to present this article is very simply that even the capitalists are admitting it, right? Like, fundamentally, I don't disagree with anything this guy had to say in this particular article. And in fact, I feel like he set the stage very effectively, right? But he's a capitalist, right? And he believes in capitalism, which is articulated very simply in jobs. Everything is about jobs. That your definition as a human and who you are and what you are isn't defined on what you love or isn't defined on what you create. It's defined on the job that you do, right? And in this way, the capitalist class is trying to control dissent, right? That what are they trying to defend against? Revolution. They're trying to defend against the seizure of the means of production, the shift from the away from capitalist systems into socialist and communist systems. That's what they're attempting to defend against. And so they need to present themselves as actually having rational solutions. They need to present themselves as actually being willing to address the problems that they themselves create. And the populace can fall for this. That definitely the populace can fall for this. That as long as we are willing to accept the crumbs, to accept the modest solutions that are being given by the ownership class, then we will always be faced with the crises of capitalism. And again, it's always worth bringing up that under FDR, the capitalists conceded basically everything, right? They gave everything away except the means of production, which is the goal for them. And someone like this fellow, Frank Stronach, like, perhaps he's just a well-meaning fellow, right? And why shouldn't I believe that? I can believe that. He's a well-meaning people with 7 decades of experience in the system, right? Who's trying to turn around and say, and like he's putting the blame where it belongs, right? He calls it the business class or the businesses, but it's the ownership class, right? Yeah, capitalists will never allow workers to share surplus value of labor. That's why revolution is inevitable. But it does pay to remember that, like, when put under threat of revolution, the capitalists will concede everything except the means of production, which is why we need to completely is never give up. Like, never give up. They're going to concede everything. They're going to give you everything that they think that you want or that you do want, right? As long as you keep letting them be the owners. And that's the goal, right? Like, the analogy is very clearly taking the ring into Mordor and throwing the ring into Mount Doom. That while we are going up the mountain, the ring will promise us everything. But even more than that, the ring will deliver those things to us. The ring will give us raises. The ring will give us stocks. The ring will give us time off, days off, maternity leave, a basic income. The ring will give all of that away, so long as you do not throw the ring back into Mount Doom. And it's far more likely, right? And as the story goes, right? Every single time in that story, anytime anybody reached the pinnacle of Mount Doom to throw the ring in, what happened? They said no, and they kept the ring for themselves. And should Lord of the Rings be a true prophecy, the only thing that really will destroy capital in the end is that its most loyal adherents, in their frenzy to protect capital, will themselves destroy it. Because they've become so twisted and so distorted and so incapable of understanding what it is that they're doing, that in the war to see who controls the means of production, they will in turn destroy it. I love that analogy. Throw the ring into Mount Doom, dude. Like, climb that mountain, throw the ring in. Like, it's probably not going to go that way. Like, it's usually the case that we end up more like Boromir. We can use its power for ourselves. That kind of thing. Which, heads up, Lord of the Rings, definitely worth a rewatch. If you haven't seen that movie recently, you go right ahead. Absolutely brilliant. Oh, also, complete side point. So the movie The Princess Bride, right? I have finally realized the only remake of that movie that I would accept, and it is a Muppets version. That if they did the Muppets Present a Princess Bride, or The Princess Bride, I'd be all in. I would like push my chips all the way in. I'd be like, absolutely. Let's get Kermit as Wesley, Miss Piggy as Buttercup, right? Gonzo as Inigo Montoya, right? And just line for line, shot for shot, scene for scene, let's go. But it's the Muppets. I'm completely in for that. Like I'm absolutely in for that. More of a Tom Bombadil. Yeah, just what, like a god walking around just singing all the time? Tom Bombadil was like a god, right? Like he was just not connected to the true narrative of the story. NATO mounting build-up near Belarus, Russia claims. Yeah, that's probably likely, right? Very believable. Amid heightened tensions with NATO, Moscow has vowed that it will not turn a blind eye to the U.S.-led military bloc's purported build-up near Belarus, as Russian officials seek responses to their proposed security guarantees. Oh yeah, disconnected from everything. Tom Bombadil's like that, yeah. In many ways, we're very... In many ways, I think the reason why people love Tom Bombadil is because of that feature. That we all secretly want to be like Tom Bombadil. Just kind of, disconnected from everything. Not really affected by the changing shifts of the world. So the tensions that are going on in Ukraine are... The blowback on this is going to be so big. Like, it's going to be like, we're going to end up with like another 9/11 event in America, for sure. That like, the Nazi groups that we are actively funding in Ukraine are turning around and attempting to influence organizations within America as well. And that the result of all of this is going to be an increase in white supremacist domestic terror. And it doesn't take a genius to figure out that if the Republicans are in power, they're going to turn a blind eye to that kind of behavior because the white supremacists in America vote Republican, right? Like it doesn't take a real genius to figure this out. And that the reason why you should not be funding proxy groups and terrorist organizations within a nation and a society is because they always go rogue and they always blow back, right? Always. Like, for God's sakes, Osama bin Laden. Like, Osama bin Laden is the pinnacle of this. That the CIA funded and trained Osama bin Laden and the Taliban and Al-Qaeda and all these guys, right? And what was the result of that? Right? And now we've got, like, we're in a quagmire war in Iraq still, right? That's still happening. And with no end in sight. Like, no end in sight. And when the Americans left Afghanistan, the enemy they were fighting took power instantly. Like, it happened in a week. It was no time whatsoever. So it's just like, we're seeing the same thing in Ukraine. That the reason why the Americans took Ukraine over, right? The reason why NATO overthrew the Ukrainian government and installed their own regime is so that they could have a foothold in the region in order to fuck with Belarus and Russia. So that they could disrupt the Belt and Road Initiative. It's just like, it's as shitty as possible, right? It's as shitty as it could possibly be. Like, and it's so fucking annoying, right? Like, it's so fucking annoying, because the thing that makes it the most annoying is that now we're into a phase of geopolitics where destabilization is part of the goal, right? Like, when we were talking about Iraq, there was always this idea that, like, we'll invade Iraq, we'll stabilize the region, but with somebody who's on our side, right? And start pilfering its resources, right? But now more and more, have a good one, Alex. Now more and more, you're starting to see that the reason why they're in Ukraine is to destabilize Ukraine, and then also destabilize Belarus, or at least waste Belarus's time, so that Moscow can't continue developing Belarus or Ukraine, right? Because the fear is that that Russia will reclaim these former Soviet provinces, right? And that Russia will continue to grow and encroach into Europe. That's always the fear. And so the goal now is literal destabilization, because you can't develop if it's destabilized, right? Yeah, the US has lost every war since Korea, but more and more I'm beginning to see that winning these wars is not the point, right? It's literally not the point. The point is to destabilize it, right? Like, what that if the goal is destabilization so that countries can't develop and can't grow their borders, right? If that's the goal, well, then the United States has actually been quite successful at that, right? Now, I don't think it's a successful long-term strategy, because you spend a lot of money doing it, you don't get anything out of it, except the destabilization, except the chaos. And when you leave, like, and we're seeing how that's blowing back in Afghanistan, right? They left, their enemies took over, and immediately China started building that rail. Like, immediately, China's just like, rail, build the rail, build the rail. Yeah, Libya was very stable before we bombed it to shit. Yeah, exactly. Right? That destabilization is the point. And that's sort of the heartbreaking aspect of it. The Communist Party of Russia and Federation has an interesting website, for sure. Well, there is an upsurgence of Stalinism happening in Russia right now. That right now, the credible threat, what we would call the opposition party in Russia, is a coalition of, like, Stalinists and like neo-communists, right? Like, people who are looking at Putin and saying, hey, we should do communism again. Like, this period of neoliberalism, right, hasn't necessarily been beneficial for Russia. Right? It's been beneficial for the oligarchs. It's been beneficial for the wealthy, but not for the people. Yeah, Iraq was relatively stable before the invasion. Yeah, it was complete. Like, it was part of the success of what Saddam Hussein had done is that he had managed to not bridge, but definitely ensure that the tensions between the Sunnis and the Shiites were on a low simmer instead of on a boiling pot, right? That was always the benefit. And now, like, I actually think that we're not going to get out of Iraq without a division, right? Seems pretty likely to me that Iraq is going to break in two. That you're going to have a break of the northern Iraq will go one way with Erbil, right? And the line will be like right there, and Baghdad is going to go the other way, right? It could, and the divide could go like this with Basra, right? Going one way with Baghdad going the other. Or it could be like a three-way split, like just straight up like, right? Because while this is all happening, of course, you have the Greater Israel Project. Like, they're still hoping that the Greater Israel Project works, right? That's still like the American wet dream, is to get the they want the borders of Israel to extend to take over the Suez Canal, right? They want the Suez Canal for themselves. They want Jordan, and they want huge sections of Syria and Iraq as well, and then also sections of Saudi Arabia. But I don't know that Saudi Arabia will play ball on that regard. Yep, did you hear that Saudi Arabia increased oil exports to China? Of course they did, dude. Like, of course they did. Saudi Arabia are Machiavellian political geniuses. Like, you want to like if this was a board game, right? If we were playing the world board game, the stat bonuses that Saudi Arabia would get would be things like huge oil deposits, right? So they start with like a huge resource benefit, but also just like diplomatic geniuses. These guys know where power is. They see where the wind is blowing, and they're not fucking around, right? Like, they know that they need to maintain power. They're gonna blow towards the power structure, right? And the power structure right now is absolutely China, which is what this whole Ukrainian situation is about, right? That if they can disrupt the rail that goes from Moscow to Minsk, and then Minsk into Warsaw, and then into the rest of Europe, right? If they can destabilize that key infrastructure, then they can prevent the Europeans from swinging towards China, which I think is an inevitability at this point. Like, I don't think the Americans can actually stop that from happening, especially as domestically they descend into total fascism, right? Like, it seems like the Europeans are completely fine if the Americans want to destroy, brown people, right? If the Americans want to destroy the Middle East and destroy this kind of stuff, it looks like the Europeans are more or less like, yeah, okay, whatever. But if the United States itself begins to collapse into a form of fascism, no, I don't think the Europeans are cool with that. I think the Europeans have reason not to be cool with that, and just straight up, like, who's stable, right? Like, nations will just defer to stability. They will look at who is stable, and if the United States is destabilized, and all it's doing is going around the world attempting to destabilize everybody else, well, the Europeans are going to get to a point where they're like, maybe no. Yeah, did you hear Syria was destabilized by the Iraq invasion, Venezuela was stable before the sanctions. Yeah, instability always been the point. Goes back to what the British did to India. Yeah, they destroyed the looms, forced them to buy British textiles. Exactly. Don't give them another option, right? Like, don't let them develop independently. Don't let them gravitate towards any other power structure, right? And if a country is destroyed, then it can't do that. The thing that the United States is really faced up with now, though, is that the economic development, like, the Chinese know how to develop economically, right? And they know how to do it rapidly. And it has gotten to a point now where the Chinese can actually build faster than the United States can bomb. And you're going to see that in Afghanistan. Like, in 5 years' time, Afghanistan is going to be a different place. Completely different. That the 20 years of destruction and devastation wrought by the Americans is going to be washed away. That the Afghani people will have rebuilt and reconstituted themselves because of the connection that they are going to have, boop, 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 with the Belt and Road Initiative. Right? And you're going to hear about, like, they're going to fund, like, the East Turkmen, like, the East Islamic, forget it, the terrorist group that is in Turkmenistan. They're going to fund these guys, and they'll be going into Afghanistan. They'll be trying to blow this shit up, right? That's how the Americans roll. They're just the terrorists on the world stage at this point. That, like, if the Americans had an attribute, it would be, like, the ability to foment terror groups. That's really what it is. Like, just overthrow a government, propagate terrorist groups. Yeah, that's the East Turkmenish independence movement. That's what it is. I was stuck on Islamic, but that's not the word. It's independence. And like, right, just send Nazis in. Send Nazis in. Destroy the Belt and Road Initiative. Send Nazis in. Right? And then suddenly there's going to be like a Nazi group. And the Nazis the Ukrainian Nazis will invade like Moldova. And they'll take over Moldova, right? And then suddenly Ukraine will be like the epicenter of a new Nazi group. And there will be like a literal Adolf Hitler walking around being a Nazi. And we'll all be like, how did this happen? Like, what do you fucking think? Like, we made it happen. We funded it. And then the Americans will go in, overthrow that guy, and be like, USA, USA. And all the Americans will be like, yeah, we fight Nazis. We certainly don't fund them and implement them and empower them. Right? And it'll actually look an awful lot like Saddam Hussein with Iraq. That we funded Saddam Hussein the whole time. He was our boy. Like, he was our guy. Right? And then the minute we decided that he wasn't playing ball with us, we went in, created a quagmire. Same situation. It'll be the same here. Right? It was Islamic. Yeah. They're a far-right Salafist group. I just haven't talked about these guys in a while. That's the reason why I was blanking on their name. Like, this movement here, the East Turkasian Islamic movement, they're really important in regards to the Xinjiang conversation, right? Like, they're the guys that are going in and fucking around in Xinjiang, right? Like, they're the reason why the Chinese are doing what they're doing in the Xinjiang province. Because, like, what, you think you should just ignore terror cells? Like, golly gee. All right. Canada ranked 6th most miserable country by think tank. Due to its high rates of inflation and unemployment, a conservative-leaning think tank has ranked Canada the 6th most miserable country in the world. On Tuesday, the Fraser Institute. Right? There's the Fraser Institute again, eh? Isn't it interesting? I think that the Fraser Institute is really doing everything it can to try to regain its credibility. That in my view, the Fraser Institute, like if I look at somebody's CV and I see the Fraser Institute on it, I'm immediately like, oh, garbage bin. Like, I don't need to trust you anymore. And I'm seeing more and more of the Fraser Institute, and it is like they're looking around and being like, we can't just be complete total liars. Like, we actually have to root some of what we say in reality, right? And so I'm wondering where the grift is here. Because they're obviously not telling us the truth. Like, they're not interested in telling us the truth. The Fraser Institute it exists as part of the death cult. It is an institution that exists in order to promulgate and propagate the ideology of the capitalist death cult. That's the point of the Fraser Institute. And so when it comes out with a paper where it's like, due to high rates of inflation and unemployment, Canada's the 6th most miserable country in the world. I'm like, what's the game? Like, what's the game here? Like, why are they grifting us? Like, why are they kind of trying to tell us the truth all of a sudden? Right? With its misery index score of 10.88, Canada was the 6th most miserable country, thanks to its 3.15% inflation rate, which 3.15 is actually low, and 7.7% unemployment rate, which again is low. Like, these numbers are probably higher than this. Like, there are some articles I've been reading where inflation is as high as 5% and unemployment rates as high as 10%. Spain was the most miserable, with a score of 17.61, followed by Greece with 15.73 and Italy with 11.96. And it's like, is Spain the most miserable? Kind of funny that, like, Spain is the most miserable when they've got, like, a pretty heavy, like, socialist kind of movement that exists within it. Like, I worry, well, I shouldn't worry, but, like, it's completely to the benefit of the Fraser Institute to be like, oh, this place isn't exploitable by capitalists to destroy. Misery! Right? Like, that's exactly how they're going to report on things. France, the US, Australia, and the UK were all deemed less miserable than Canada. Canadians are rightly concerned about the country's high inflation and unemployment rates, and when compared to other developed countries, Canada is not doing well, said Jason Clemens, the Fraser Institute's executive vice president. And the only thing that's giving this credibility to me is not that it's the Fraser Institute, but that it's their study is aligning with the OECD studies, right? Like, the OECD has been saying for a while now that Canada's economy is in the shitter and it's going to stay that way, right? And so it's like the Fraser Institute read that and was like, oh, we can't lie anymore. Like, the OECD has said it, and if we say it's not the case, then we look like assholes. So we've got to at least admit that what the OECD is reporting is true to a degree. And in that way, attempt to maintain our credibility, even though we're complete incredulous liars, right? Oh, I know, buddy. I know. Do you want to come up? You want to come up? You're coming up. Ow! Ow! Oh, I know, buddy. I know. You don't like it when you do that. But now you get pets. And also, you're an international star. Someday, someone is absolutely going to take, like, little clips of me lifting Milo up like that, and it's just going to be, like, 20 minutes of Milo and me just going, it's going to happen. I know. Governments across Canada, particularly the federal government, should prioritize policies that will make Canada less miserable by lowering inflation and unemployment. Right? The jobs. It's always jobs. You got to get people to sell themselves to the capitalist death cult more effectively. Right? More working for the death cult. That's how you make things happier for people. People are happier when they're working hard for the death cult. Liberals move to modernize CBC, making public broadcaster less reliant on advertising. So, of course, this is the National Post, so it's completely going to report on it like, CBC bad. We should get rid of the CBC. Even today, the CBC, defund the CBC was trending today. And I'm just like, that's dumb, right? Like, the CBC is a state media apparatus, right? Like, and so we know that it's going to be state propaganda. Like, we know. I think you got to be kind of a dunder to not think that the CBC is going to be something other than state propaganda. But I am more or less of the opinion that that's fine, right? Like, I think it's completely fine that the state has a propaganda network, right? Like, why is that a problem? The problem comes if people start to deceive themselves into thinking that it's something other than what it is. Or if everything that it says is always the truth 100% of the time. That, like, and that's sort of the argument that comes out of the private sector, right? The private corporate sector. They want to defund the CBC so that they can completely control the narrative, right? They don't want there to be like a national broadcasting company that can broadcast something that counters their narrative, right? The National Post doesn't want competitors. The Globe and Mail don't want competitors, right? They want to be able to say whatever it is they want to say and not even have another institution that is capable of challenging it, right? And like, right now the liberals are more or less playing ball with corporate power, right? Basically just reading cue cards from corporate power, doing basically what they're told. But like, another government can come in, that narrative can change. And so of course the conservatives, like, and of course the corporate power structure wants to destroy the CBC, right? And like, it's completely always ongoing. And I won't be too surprised if we actually see something happen on this regard, right? What's the conclusion of this article? Let's see. If you want them to move away from advertising and stop competing with the private broadcasters for advertising and do the kind of content that the private broadcasters won't do, then give them the money to do it. Yeah, there you go. Broadcasting consultant Kelly Lynn Ashton noted that debate about the CBC's mandate comes up regularly, including at multiple parliamentary committee studies in the past decade or so. The reason that keeps coming up is that there's a basic fundamental disconnect, because the government keeps asking the CBC to do more, but not giving them more money to do it. Oh, big surprise, right? Big fucking surprise. Like, do more. No. We're not going to give you any money. No. Like, that's classic neoliberalism, right? It's what all of these companies are doing right now, right? Half the staff, burn them out, put up a sign saying nobody needs to work, hire no one new, jack prices, right? And everybody's just like, yeah, that's acceptable. That's totally acceptable. Inflation. It's inflation. Well, you gotta be dumb to think that this is true. Japan had the 7th highest suicide rate per 100,000 people in OECD. How is it one of the least miserable countries? Yeah, dude. And how do you even measure this? Like, that's the question I'd like to know. Like, I always think this with the happiness index and like this misery thing. I'm like, isn't this like the most subjective shit you've ever heard of in your life? Like, and yeah, you would think that something like the suicide rate would actually play. You would think that, like, hey, your citizens are committing suicide. Like, shouldn't that count? No, the only measure we're going to give is inflation and unemployment, right? Capitalism. People aren't engaging with capitalism. They must be miserable, right? That's really, I think, the conclusion of this Simon Fraser report. Is it really is just like, Spain isn't connecting with capitalism as much. They must be miserable. Like, go fuck yourselves, you fucking hacks. Like, get the fuck out of here, you goddamn Simon Fraser Institute losers. Like, God. Just, if it's not capitalism, it doesn't count. We literally just handed the Legacy News, aka Pillars of Democracy, a huge bailout, and then still complain about the CBC getting money. Yeah. If any institution, like, why, like, literally conservatives say, why should I pay for someone else's X? Like, why should I pay for someone else's garbage collection? Why should I pay for someone else's education? Why should I pay for someone else's health care? Why should I pay for someone else's news consumption, right? Okay, buddy, you're going to go back down. We love you. Goodbye. Like, that's, and conservatives say that to your face, openly, right? And the answer is obvious, right? Like, in regards to, like, garbage collection. Because I don't want to live in a country filled with garbage, right? Because I don't want to live in a country filled with stupid people. Because I don't want to live in a country full of broken down, unhealthy people, right? Like, it really is that simple. Like, it really is that straightforward. And you get into conversations with these guys, and they're like, well, if people won't throw away their own garbage, if they won't pay for their own garbage collection, then we should fine them. It's like, so you're going to pay for police and lawyers and judges in order to erect this bureaucracy that will be more expensive than just picking up their garbage? That's the conversation. Like, straight up. Like, that's the conversation. Conservatives are so dumb. So fucking dumb, dude. Like, they're so fucking dumb. It just drives me crazy how fucking dumb these guys are. Like, I wish that I lived in the period of time when, like, the red Tories were around, right? Those conservatives, like, sounded all right. Yeah, burning barrels for every home. Exactly. Like, straight up, just like, these guys are willing to spend $10 to fine people, but they won't spend $1 to just pick someone's garbage up. Like, that's literally what we're talking about. That, like, they won't spend $1 to send a kid to school, but they'll send $10 to incarcerate that kid after they have to turn to crime because they don't have a fucking education. Like, we're really, really short-sighted. Well, conservatives especially are literally just like it really is like, imagine like Mr. Krabs, right? Like, just me money. Like, that's it. That's the start and end of their entire ideology. Me money. Like, and on every single fucking issue, we have to sit these guys down and have the same fucking conversation every single time. And it's like we're talking to fucking Mr. Krabs. All right, Mr. Krabs, you like money, right? Yeah, I like money. So I need you to spend $1 to ensure that kids can go to school. But me money! Okay. But if you don't send kids to school, then you're going to end up in a society full of illiterate morons, right? And that means that you're going to end up spending more money to deal with all the illiterate morons, right? So, do you want to spend $1 now, or do you want to spend $10 tomorrow? And that's literally the conversation on every single issue. And it's the only conversation they care about. Like, you can't talk to these guys about, like, social well-being. You can't talk to these guys about empathy or compassion or any of that kind of stuff, right? You genuinely have to talk to these guys about how much money is it going to cost you. And that's all they care about. Like, it. Start to finish. They do not care. And so, yeah, exactly. Donate to the Children's Fund. Why? What have the children ever done for me? And then these guys turn around and they're like, why won't anybody work for me? Like, I'd love to see some SpongeBob episodes about the Great Resignation, eh? Like, some SpongeBob episodes about this time. I feel like the Krusty Krab would be the perfect setting to talk about, like, why aren't people working for capitalists anymore? Like, you imagine, like, SpongeBob actually, like, quitting, actually going on strike, you know? Like, perfect. So perfect. And take the issue of homelessness, right? Like, we are spending more to keep people homeless than it would cost to get them off the streets and give them a house, right? And to me, that's the only argument a conservative will ever care about. Like, oh, you want to pay more to keep them on the streets, eh? Weird. From Oxfam International. 10 richest men double their fortunes in pandemic, while incomes of 99% of humanity fall. New billionaire minted every 26 hours as inequality contributes to the death of one person every 4 seconds. The world's 10 richest men more than doubled their fortunes from $700 billion to $1.5 trillion at a rate of $15,000 per second, or $1.3 billion a day. Have a good one, Grinning. During the first 2 years of pandemic that has seen the incomes of 99% of humanity fall, and over 160 million more people forced into poverty. If these 10 men were to lose 99.999% of their wealth tomorrow, they would still be richer than 99% of all the people on this planet, said Oxfam International's executive director, Gabriella Butcher. They now have 6 times more wealth than the poorest 3.1 billion people. In a new briefing, Inequality Kills, published today ahead of the World Economic Forum's Davos agenda, Oxfam says that inequality is contributing to the death of at least 21,000 people each day, or one person every 4 seconds. This is a conservative finding based on deaths globally from lack of access to healthcare, gender-based violence, hunger, and climate breakdown. It has never been so important to start righting the violent wrongs of the obscene inequality by clawing back elites' power and extreme wealth, including through taxation, getting that money back into the real economy, and to save lives, she said. Billionaires' wealth has risen more since COVID-19 began than it has in the last 14 years. At $5 trillion, this is the biggest surge in billionaire wealth since records began. A one-off 99% tax on the 10 richest men's pandemic windfalls, for example, could pay to make enough vaccines for the world, to provide universal healthcare and social protection, fund climate adaptation, and reduce gender-based violence in over 80 countries. All this while still leaving these men $8 billion better off than they were before the pandemic. Billionaires have had a terrific pandemic. Central banks pumped trillions of dollars into financial markets to save the economy, yet much of that has ended up lining the pockets of billionaires riding a stock market boom. Vaccines were meant to end this pandemic, yet rich governments allowed pharma billionaires and monopolies to cut off the supply to billions of people. The result is that every kind of inequality imaginable risks rising. The predictability of it is sickening. The consequences of it kill, said Butcher. Extreme inequality is a form of economic violence, where policies and political decisions that perpetrate the wealth and power of a privileged few result in direct harm to the vast majority of ordinary people across the world and the planet itself. The world's response to the pandemic has unleashed this economic violence particularly acutely across racialized, marginalized, and gendered lines. As COVID-19 spikes, this turns to surges of gender-based violence, even as yet more unpaid care is heaped upon women and girls, Butcher said. The pandemic has set gender parity back from 99 years to now 135 years. Women collectively lost $800 billion in earnings in 2020, with 13 million fewer women in work now than there were in 2019. 252 men have more wealth than all 1 billion women and girls in Africa and Latin America and the Caribbean combined. The pandemic has hit racialized groups hardest. During the second wave of the pandemic in England, people of Bangladeshi origin were 5 times more likely to die of COVID-19 than the white British population. Black people in Brazil are 1.5 times more likely to die from COVID-19 than white people. In the US, 3.4 million black Americans would be alive today if their life expectancy was the same as white people. This is directly linked to historical racism and colonialism. Inequality between countries is expected to rise for the first time in a generation. Developing countries denied access to sufficient vaccines because of rich governments' protection of pharmaceutical corporations' monopolies have been forced to slash social spending as their debt levels spiral, and now face the prospect of austerity measures. The proportion of people with COVID-19 who die from the virus in developing countries is roughly double that in rich countries. The COVID-19 pandemic has revealed openly both the motive of greed and the opportunity by political and economic means by which extreme inequality has become an instrument of economic violence, said Butcher. After years now of researching and campaigning on the issue, this is the shocking but inevitable conclusion that Oxfam has had to reach today. Despite the huge cost of fighting the pandemic, in the past 2 years, rich country governments have failed to increase taxes on the wealth of the richest and continued to privatize public goods such as vaccine science. They have encouraged corporate monopolies to such a degree that in the pandemic period alone, the increase in market concentration threatens to be more in 1 year than in the past 15 years from 2000 to 2015. Inequality goes to the heart of the climate crisis, as the richest 1% emit more than twice as much CO2 as the bottom 50% of the world, driving climate change throughout 2020 and 2021 that has contributed to wildfires, floods, tornadoes, crop failures, and hunger. Inequality at such a pace and scale is happening by choice, not chance, Butcher said. Not only have our economic structures made all of us less safe against this pandemic, they are actively enabling those who are already extremely rich and powerful to exploit this crisis for their own profit. The report notes the significance of the world's 2 largest economies, the US and China, starting to consider policies that reduce inequality, including by passing higher tax rates on the rich and taking action against monopolies. This provides us some measure of hope for a new economic consensus to emerge, says Butcher. Oxfam recommends that governments urgently claw back the gains made by billionaires by taxing this huge new wealth made since the start of the pandemic. Excuse me. Through permanent wealth and capital taxes. Invest the trillions that could be raised by these taxes towards progressive spending on universal health care and social protection, climate change adaptation, and gender-based violence prevention and programming. Tackle sexist and racist laws that discriminate against women and racialized people and create new gender-equal laws to uproot violence and discrimination. All sectors of society must urgently define policies that will ensure women, racialized and other oppressed groups are represented in all decision-making spaces. End laws that undermine the rights of workers to unionize and strikes, and set up stronger legal standards to protect them. Rich governments must immediately waive intellectual property rules over COVID-19 vaccine technologies to allow more countries to produce safe and effective vaccines to usher in the end of the pandemic. Butcher said, "There is no shortage of money." That lie died when governments released $16 trillion to respond to the pandemic. There is only a shortage of courage and imagination needed to break free from the failed, deadly straitjacket of extreme neoliberalism. Governments would be wise to listen to the movements, the young climate strikers, Black Lives Matter activists, Ni Una Menos feminists, Indian farmers, and others who are demanding justice and inequality. Oxfam not fucking around. Oxfam not fucking around, man. Like, swing for the fences. Swing for the fences. Like, the comet's coming, right? The comet's coming. It's right there. You can see it. It's really obvious, right? Just look up. Pretty straightforward. And there are some institutions that are like, yeah, we're not going to go down quiet, or we're not going to go down silently. Like, boom. Well, I guess Oxfam's communist. I guess they're just like a bunch of commies over at Oxfam, right? Did you see the Edmonton PD is lobbying for a law that allows them to access the records of liquor stores of who bought what to aid them in crime fighting? There's a video with scary music as well. I mean, don't expand police powers. Straight up. The police do not operate for the benefit of the public. Like, that's not why the police are there. Right? The police operate for the benefit of the power structure. So don't expand their power. Very, very straightforwardly. I'm going to bookmark this one. From Grandma Grit. We never used to have a fire season. It was called autumn, and we wore sweaters in October. We didn't have multi-year droughts. The lakes were full and snow on the mountaintops. Don't normalize climate crisis. It's not normal. This is kind of the crazy thing about this whole climate thing, right? Like, right as this climate change catastrophe is starting to reach its height, there's literally an entire political movement in the United States that simply denies that it exists. Like it would be one thing if there was an acknowledgement across the board that it was happening, but there was like a bit of disagreement about how to move forward in the most effective manner, right? What's the most effective, efficient manner of actually dealing with this crisis that is obviously here? But in the United States, like literally half the political apparatus, that's the Republican Party, denies that there is a problem at all. Like, that's nuts. Like, that's nuts. Like there's an invading army kicking in your doors. And you're just sitting around pretending like it's not happening. Like it's crazed. Like how are we actually going to articulate this to our children should this be a thing? How are we actually going to tell our children how this shit went down? Like how are we going to communicate to them that like, yep, the whole fucking place burnt down, droughts, all this kind of crazy shit, because half the population refused to acknowledge there was a problem in the first place. And like, how do you even talk to these people? How do you talk to someone that's this delusional? Right? How do you talk to somebody who's this fucking delusional? Who's like completely disconnected from reality to this degree? Where like it's literally going to be like the place will be burning down around them. It's exactly like the stupid fucking dog meme. The place is on fire and they're just like, this is fine. Like, and like as I go through my normal kind of day-to-day sort of stuff, I try to, you know, I'm not always aware of it. It's not always present in my life every single moment. It's not something that I'm constantly, but at the same time there is like this looming anxiety, right? Like kids these days, like we've got high rates of depression, high rates of anxiety. Like, yeah. Like there's a looming threat. It's like literally the Grim Reaper is standing behind you, constantly whispering in your ear, climate change is coming and it's going to absolutely destroy you. It's coming, right? Constantly looming there. And even when you're having a nice day and when everything's going fine, you know that there's this looming threat that your government is doing zero about. Literally zero. And anytime we get a government that actually starts to do anything, like take what happened here in Ontario, right? We finally convinced these liberals to actually give a shit about climate change. Like the Win liberals were implementing like 700 climate change programs. Were all of them going to be effective? No, obviously, right? And this is what the conservatives love to do. They love to find the one policy that wasn't going to be like the thing to solve it, and then they talk about exclusively that and ignore the 699 other programs. And then when Doug Ford came in, he destroyed all of them. Like all of them. And if you bring that up with a conservative, they don't care. Like they genuinely don't care, right? Because they don't care about anything other than their own pocketbook, right? And this idea that we're literally facing a crisis that is worse than like the fucking Nazis, and we're just doop 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 doop. Like rebel completely. Stop participating in this. Stop participating in the system completely, and like be vocal about why you're no longer participating. Tell these people why you're no longer participating. Like, I'm not going to work this shitty job while the place burns down. Like, it's pretty black and white in my perspective. Like, why should I spend even a moment of my time doing this while I'm abandoned to a climate change catastrophe? Like, give me one reason. Give me one fucking reason. And like, more and more as the crisis unfolds, I'm like, stop paying rent, stop paying taxes, just stop participating, right? Let them start to waste their time, right? And then very steadily, all of the bureaucrats whose job it is to actually maintain these systems will also come to the conclusion that like, wait, like, this is worthless. Like, it's pointless. You want me to be chasing after people to nickel and dime them while the whole fucking place burns down? No. Like, and in this way, the entire system will stop functioning, right? It simply will. Because people will realize, like, you are abandoned, right? Like, that's the harrowing truth about all of this, right? Is that you are abandoned. That your political government, your provincial government, your municipal government, your federal government, your state government, all of them, not a single level and then your businesses and all of that. Not one institution, not one structure is even attempting to begin to fight against climate change. Not your military, nobody. What are they doing instead? What are they doing instead? They're overthrowing the Ukrainian government. They're maintaining a genocide in Palestine and maintaining a genocide in Oman, or Yemen rather, right? Like, they're spending all of the money that we give them in taxes on fucking war. Well, and that war is actually the number one perpetuation of the destruction of the species through climate change. And we're all supposed to just bow our heads and keep doing it. How about no? Like, how about no? Like, stop participating. Rebel in every possible way. And start spitting on these guys. Like, Doug Ford is worse than any Nazi you've ever met. Like, even the Nazis didn't attempt to destroy the species. Right? And incidentally, like, the people who are voting conservative at this stage in the game, yeah, I've met them. They're losers. Like, they're thieves and grifters. And it's just like, they're disgusting people. They're disgusting people who don't even care about their own children. Like, that's obvious. They don't care about their own children at all. If they cared about their own children, they'd be doing something about this catastrophe that they deny the existence of. Like, we can't just keep going to work. Like, we literally can't. Like, we literally can't. And yet, we're just doing it. No. Like, quit your job. If you can't quit your job, organize a strike. If the people you're working with won't participate in the strike, then begin to sabotage your workplace. Like, it's getting to that degree where we have to grind this system to a halt. It needs zero momentum. It needs to stop. It needs to end. Because the alternative is the destruction of the species. Like, and the people who are denying it, and the people who are trying to benefit from it financially, right? They're like fucking Sauron or just like Skeletor, right? They're fucking like Machiavellian. Like, they might as well be sitting in chairs going, "Oh, He-Man!" Right? Like, they might as well. And for some reason, we're struggling to make a Superman story. I literally, at this stage in the game, could watch a movie that was about Superman going up to Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, and just crushing their heads. That could be the whole thing. Just present these people, do a little mini documentary about who they are, have Superman walk into the room, crush their head, and I'd be like, awesome. And then move on to the next one. I would watch that movie. I think a lot of people would watch that fucking movie. Right? Like, and it does come to the point where we have to start asking ourselves seriously, why don't we care about this? This is like the largest existential threat we've ever faced as a species, and we just don't care. We just don't care. Like, do we just want to die? Is that what it is? Are we finally to a point as a species where we have decided that this life is not worth living collectively? And so here is an opportunity to eradicate life, and so we're taking it. Right? Have we truly and honestly entered a time where mass suicide is the answer for humanity? That's the end game for us. That we're just gonna, try to have as much fun as we can until the whole thing burns down. The ONDP are looking for research assistant and pre-election campaign organizer if you want to work. Salary range, need a federal jobs program ASAP. I mean, I don't know, dude. I don't have the patience for these fucking NDPers, honestly. Like, they're gonna run a shitty campaign and they're gonna lose. Like, that's what's gonna happen. Like, I don't know though. Good tip though, Vince. Like, good tip. Like, we've got to do something. We got to get involved somehow, right? We need to participate somehow. I'm just so... Like, how do we communicate this to people? How do we talk about this without falling into despair and nihilism, right? And the only solution that I can come up with is that we need to galvanize ourselves and get into the streets. Like, we need to be organizing and participating in major street protests and like, we've got to surround the halls of power. Because it's easy, I think, for people to fall into despair and nihilism. Like, my number one critique of the movie Don't Look Up is that there was no serious conversation about organizing major protests, about organizing the people in order to surround the halls of power, right? That wasn't seriously contemplated. It was like presented as sort of an off the side or off the cuff kind of a thing. Whereas I look at it and I go, no, that's the solution. Like, the solution actually is to surround the halls of power, and to let it be known that this is unacceptable. Like, what is happening is insane. It's insanely unacceptable. And our participation in it should no longer be assumed. Right? Like, and that is how the corporate power structure has operated for decades and decades, is that our participation in the system has always been assumed. Well, no more. Be done with it, right? And every single time you're seeing a strike prop up and a strike come up, it is explicitly a statement by those people in the society that we aren't going to tolerate this anymore. Like, and those strikes need to spread, and they need to become larger, and we need mass general strikes. We need mass general strikes. Like what happened in France, right? Like, to me, this should be daily. Like, this is what the society should become. And I'm quite serious about this. Like, this is what the society should look like every single day. Like, this idea that you just, like, go to sleep, wake up, go to a job you barely tolerate, and then go home, watch, like, 2 hours of television, and then go to sleep, only to wake up and do it again. And then get, like, a couple of days off on the weekend so that you can do chores and maybe try to enjoy, like, a moment of time with a friend or family member, right? Only to then grind yourself back into this fucking death cult. No. This is what society should look like. This should be every day. This should be the new culture. Because we absolutely need to stop participating. Like, full stop. Full stop. And, like, as this occurs, we need to be redrawing a new constitution. One that gives environmental protection. One that gives protection, economic protection, to citizens. Like, one that insists that the capitalist class is eliminated. Because the disease is capitalism. And it's gotten quite obvious at this point. Like, the thing that is destroying us is capitalism. It's beyond obvious. Like, we really are talking about, like, if you had an infection in your arm, right? If you had a cut across your forearm and it was black and festering and oozing and gross, and a doctor was looking at you saying, hey, we've got to amputate that limb. Like, it's got to go, right? Well, what are you going to say? You're going to deny that that the infection exists? You're going to try to find another solution outside of what the professionals are telling you? You're gonna just, like, what, strike out alone or any of that? Well, then the infection's gonna kill you, right? We are at a point where we have to amputate the limb, and the limb is capitalism. It's got to go. The parasite needs to be expelled. It must be. It just has to be that way. There is no alternative. Like, and the solution's not going to come electorally, right? It's not going to come because you put a fucking ballot in a ballot box. Like, that's not how it's going to work. That the streets need to look like this. This is what needs to happen. And we're just not even close. So are we suicidal? Is that who we are as a people? Is this the end game for Western civilization? Is it self-annihilation? Because right now the answer looks like yes. That it is self-annihilation. That right now, when I look at the protest movements that exist in the society, I'm seeing thousands of people on the streets protesting vaccines, huge anti-vax movement. I'm seeing 1,000 people get on the streets to protest animal cruelty. I'm seeing a couple hundred people get together to talk about climate change and walk by the halls of power. And I'm seeing 20 people stand up for poverty. Like, are we just going to self-immolate? Are we just going to stand by and let the wave take us over and just that's the end of the story? Looks like. Right now. Looks like that's the case. And it just simply doesn't need to be that way. Like, it simply doesn't need to be that way. And that's what makes it so annoying and embarrassing. That, like, we could do literally anything else. Like, literally anything else. And it would be better than what we're doing now. Even if all we did was go and lay out in a field and watch the sun. And just, like, watch the clouds all day. That would be better. Like, go for a walk around your neighborhood and go home and then go to sleep. That would be better. Right? Just stop going to your stupid job that doesn't matter at all. Like, is it going to take your town burning down? Is that what it's going to take? It looks like. Always worth pointing out, everything Doug Ford cut during his first year as premier. So canceled the 50 million tree program, right? The latest casualty of Ford's budget, 4.7 million in annual funding for Forests Ontario's 50 million tree program. The goal of the program was to plant 50 million trees. Rob Keane, the CEO of Forests, 40% of forest cover is needed to ensure forest sustainability, and the average right now in Southern Ontario is 26%, with some areas as low as 5%. Like, Doug Ford's such a fucking loser. Yeah, cut payments to flood management programs. Oh, good. I can't wait for the flooding. Despite scientists projecting increased floods as a result of climate change, that conservation authorities that help ensure flood resiliency in communities will lose half of their funds. Half. Like, this is where we're at. Like, as a people. We are genuinely at this stage where, like, we are going to be ruddering in to major climate change related issues, and our leadership is actively cutting the funding necessary in order to actually do something about it. Like, abandonment is the word. And now you're getting, like, this is from leftist CEO. I have pivoted from trying to convince my rich friends about the benefits of helping poor people to trying to convince my rich friends that they are less likely to be guillotined in the future if they publicly try to help poor people. When the generation behind Gen Z, like the kids who are 12 right now, right? When these kids become adults, right? they are going to look at corporate America as a demon because that's all they've experienced. And they will have nothing. That capitalism will have taken literally everything from them. What do you think they are going to do? How do you think they are going to act? Do you think they're just going to stand by complacently and watch their society collapse around them while literal Lex Luthor type psychopaths shoot rockets into space? Like, I don't think so. I don't think so. And I'm absolutely going to report. Anybody who wants to take a shot at these guys is a hero to me. Anybody. And I will report on them as the hero that they are. Like I do about Jessica Resnick, right? Like I do about Edward Snowden, right? Assange, all these guys. These fucking absolute heroes, right? Like, as they incarcerate people, as they assassinate people, like Martin Luther King, right? Like they assassinated Malcolm X and Martin Luther King and Tupac, right? I will absolutely report on these people like the heroes that they actually are. What's up, buddy? What's up? I know, I'm speaking very aggressively and loudly. I know. It's troubling to you, isn't it? It's troubling to you. I feel like Milo's kind of like a puppet in the conversation. Like I should have like a little oh, don't worry, John, everything's fine. Look at my big eyes. Yeah, I know, buddy. You're just a little pug. You're just a little pug, aren't you? You don't have any idea or concern about the future at all. To you, your big concern is what's the next thing I get to eat? How come I'm not eating right now, John? You should give me food and pets and love. This is the reason why it's nice to have pets around. I think it's the reason why humans like having pets around, because it's nice to just interact with them and to get down onto their level and to see the world as they see the world in the immediate sort of sense. But things aren't so bad right now, is it, Milo? Is it? Everything's just completely fine right now, isn't it, Milo? Yes, you're getting pets and you're wagging your little tail and everything's super great for little Milo. And it's tough for humans to do it. It's tough for us to see the truth and then try to spend a moment of our lives not existing with this looming horror that exists above our heads. Isn't that right, Milo? Isn't that right? And yet we have to. Because it's the only way that we can remain sane. It's the only way we can get out of bed. It's the only way that we can continue to participate in the society and try to move forward. Is to take each moment as it comes. Just like my little doggy. Just like my little treasure. So that we can have little moments of connectivity. And little moments of togetherness. And little moments of happiness. So that we can love one another. And be loved. And ultimately come together and share our anxieties and fears and cry together. So that even if the storm comes and even if the fire comes, at least we won't face it alone. At least we won't face it alone. Yes, the blessing of limited consciousness. Exactly, Onward. Exactly. Sometimes I wonder, like, I know that there are other creatures in this reality that are probably about as conscious as we are. Like, octopi, I think, are like that. I think octopi are probably about as smart as we are. about as aware as we are. Crows, I definitely think that crows, like, I have had personal encounters with crows that have completely convinced me that this crow is exactly as smart as I am. Like, this guy knows what's going on exactly to the degree that I know what's going on. And in many ways, I think a crow is better off because they can fly. Like, how cool would it be to just be able to fucking fly? Just fly. Get the fuck off the ground and just like flap your wings, fly around. That'd be pretty alright, man. That'd be a pretty alright way to live in the world. Gotta tell you. And animals have things worked out in ways that we just don't. Like, what's with this still going to work through winter bullshit? Like, for real, there's like 2 feet of snow on the ground right now, and everybody's like, well, better get out and go to work. I'm like, what the fuck? No. Like, no, you don't. We should hibernate, dude. We should fucking hibernate. Like, there's a lot of bad things happening, not just to people, but animals are ripping and tearing themselves apart all over the world, large and microscopic. It's a lot to live under. Yeah, I know. And meanwhile, my little dog is just like, Jonathan, I need peanut butter. I need peanut butter, Jonathan. And I'm kind of like, yeah, you do, don't you? Don't you just need some peanut butter, my little man? Oh, yeah. The one thing I respect about pagans is respect for cycles. Yeah, cycles are badass and cool. Like, everything is cyclical, right? All right. Here's something that's coming from the NDP. I'm going to put this on while I get some water and get my dog a little peanut butter.
$2,000 a month or $500. So early on in the pandemic, I think many Canadians felt that $2,000 a month or $500 a week really is what it was a very sensible amount. I think anyone who since July, when the government unilaterally kind of reduced the amount from $2,000 to $1,200, a 40% decrease in the amount of the benefit. Anyone that's been trying to live on $1,200 a month knows that it's just woefully inadequate. So I think it's important that if the government actually wants to plausibly claim it's trying to deliver meaningful help to people, that the benefit amount correspond to that. And that's why I'm moving this amendment on behalf of the NDP to raise the lockdown benefit amount from $300 a week to.
Right? Like, they used to actually give us enough to live. Right? And that's part of the great abandonment, right? Like, it can't just be get paid to live. Wait a minute, if we just pay people to live, then how can they be exploited by a death cult? Whoa, wait a minute. And this kind of conversation that's going on is I am seeing rumblings within the NDP circles about them saying they're not going to support the Liberal government. Like, that would be very interesting, if you ask me. That, like, imagine if Parliament opened up and the NDP actually grew a spine and actually said to these Liberals, like, look, if you're not going to actually help Canadians, if you're not actually going to pass this legislation, then we're not going to support you as a government. And Canada goes back to the polls. Right? Like, that's a vote of no confidence. How would Canadians respond to that, I wonder? I do wonder that. Like, how would Canadians respond to that? Would they just sort of throw their hands up and be like, I'm sick of this shit, and then give the Liberals the majority they need, and just be like, yeah, we're done with it. See you in 4 years. Right? Or would the NDP actually be able to penetrate with a message that says, look, we're not going to support a government that's not going to support you? Will the NDP even do it? Will the NDP even be interested in it? Who's to say? I have a lot of questions about these NDP, man. I got a lot of questions about these NDP. Because I listen to them talk in the House, right? And I see what they're putting up on Twitter and all this kind of stuff, and I'm kind of like, well, these guys don't look like they're bought by the corporate power structure. But then, if you look at the Liberals and their Twitter shit and their social media stuff, they don't look like they're bought by the corporate power structure, even though they are, completely. So I don't know what to think of these guys. Are they allies, or are they just blowing smoke up our ass? The NDP would have to grow a set of balls first. Well, they are released. Like, this is from the NDP site. Under the Liberals, wealth inequality is growing. They're citing that Oxfam report I just read. The world's 10 richest men have seen their wealth doubling, right? New Democrats are committed to giving Canadians the help they need to make ends meet and making sure ultra-rich and big corporations pay their fair share for the pandemic recovery. Like, that's about as far left as I've seen rhetoric in Canada. Like, I'm standing here saying we should just eliminate these ultra-rich and corporate forces completely. Like, get rid of these guys. Like, they aren't helpful at all. Like 0%. And in fact, I'm more or less of the opinion that their existence is a problem for us. That they are actually of a negative influence on the society. Like, they don't actually facilitate anything, they just extract. Like, that's all they're doing. They're not providing services, they're parasticizing services. Like, that's how they actually operate. They're not actually innovating or creating anything. They're parasticizing that. And now the parasticization has gotten so bad that they're preventing any actual growth or anything from actually changing or moving or anything in meaningful ways. And so the New Democrats stand up, and their rhetoric is essentially like, we want you to have enough money to make your ends meet, and while also making sure that the ultra rich are the ones who pay for that, but we're still going to make sure that the ultra rich and the big corporations are the main power structure. And so, like, I just think that the New Democrats ultimately are corrupted by it, right? Like, I think that they ultimately get corrupted by it. Because even if they're successful in convincing the public that that's what they want to do, I just think that the wealthy and the powerful will infect the NDP as effectively as it infected the Liberals and the Conservatives, right? That the profit motive and the psychosis of wealth is very overwhelming. Right? It's very overwhelming. And like it doesn't look to me like the NDP are the party that's going to throw the ring into Mordor. Like, it doesn't look like they're the ones that are going to do that. Right? Like, their position actually is that we can use the ring for good. Like, that's their position. Just like the Liberals and just like the Conservatives. Right? And the swan song that they present to us sounds good. But what are they not saying? Well, they're not saying their plan is to destroy the ring, right? Like, you have to eliminate the capitalist class. You have to eliminate the capitalist class, and you have to transfer the means of production into the hands of the worker. Like, that's what needs to happen. And the ruling class, it needs to be the dictatorship of the proletariat. That the reactionary right needs to be chased out of politics completely. That their voice is not even part of the conversation. They're simply not even tolerated. And the people who actually are the voice of power and are the voice of government are the workers, exclusively. Would they be opportunist? Why shouldn't they? Of course they would be. Like, of course they should. Of course they will be. Like I don't like the NDP aren't like holy gods or something, right? It speaks to our level of desperation that we're turning to them at all, right? While they really like, I mean, their game is pretty weak if you ask me. Like I would have been like rah about it in 2000, I guess, or like 2010 maybe, but now, no, I unconvincing. I'm not very convinced by it. Like, so what'll happen is the new Democrats will come in. They will implement some kind of modest support system, right? So that they can say that they did it, and then they'll implement like a 2% wealth tax. And I'm just like, oh, okay. So it's like the parasite still lives. The system is still collapsing. And then, of course, inflation will just go out of control. The capitalists will find a new way to assault the working class in order to undercut the modest benefits, the small incremental reformism that comes out of the NDP, right? Like, we need policies that actually meet the crisis, right? We need policies that actually meet the crisis. Like, if you are being invaded by an army, you need policies to face the crisis, right? You can't simply say, oh, we're being invaded by an army, so let's put some sandbags on the street, and that'll slow down the army, and so problem solved, right? Like, that's not going to cut it. Like, you need to actually organize, train, get people armed, get people prepared for a fight, right? If you're being invaded by an army, that's what you need to do. And you need to rely on your military personnel. You need to rely on the experts. You need to rely on those people. That's what you need to do. Are we doing that? Is that even what the NDP are suggesting we do? We need a war economy. Like, we need, and that is the language that that will start to perk my ears. The language that I will start to take seriously is we need a war economy to fight against these crises that are so bad because of our negligence. That's really what it comes down to. Like, we are like a child who has refused to clean his room, and so now the room is infested with creatures and monsters and moss and bullshit and all kinds of stuff. And so now, instead of it being like, oh, the kid should go clean up his room, now you need to start hiring exterminators, and you need to start getting garbage people involved, and you need to start getting more serious shit needs to happen than just send the kid in the room and get him to clean up his room. Because the room has been neglected and has been negligent for so long, and the child has been permitted to wallow in his own filth for so long. And it's so bad now that even if the child wanted to clean his own room, which he doesn't, he wouldn't even know how to begin or how to start. Like, that is where we are. That, like, it's going to have to take other people who are not the child to go in and rectify this problem, even if the child starts to cry and pout about it. Like, we literally need to remove the capitalist class and the reactionary right from the conversation. They're going to whine about their freedom of speech, but sorry, what they are espousing is major violence. Like, the destruction of the species, the destruction of the society. That is their rhetoric. That is what they believe. And, like, they can't be part of this conversation. Like, you wouldn't let Voldemort have a say. You wouldn't let Skeletor have a say. You wouldn't let fucking Adolf Hitler have a say. And yet we're supposed to let these extraordinary reactionist far-right elements, and liberals, frankly, stand up and lie to us, bullshit us, obfuscate what's going on, pretend to help, pretend to do something meaningful. And we're supposed to take this all very seriously. Instead of actually saying, like, oh, you guys are a bunch of frauds and grifters and liars who should be tried and you should be put on trial for treason. Like, I am to that point with Justin Trudeau. Like, this guy should be tried as a traitor to Canada. It really is as if we are being invaded by an army, and he is saying, yes, we're going to get together and we're going to fight this army, and then you find out that he's funding the army that's invading us. And then all of the, like, little tiny things that he's doing are actually just, like, little bullshitisms, right? Like, oh, we're going to buy a whole bunch of ammunition for our people, and then you find out that those are all blanks. Like, where, at what point do we start to call for this guy's head? Like, at what point do we start to actually call this guy for the traitor that he actually is? Because he is. Like, he is. Like, the town of Lytton burnt down, that's on him. Like, completely. Completely. Right? Like, he's not doing anything to prevent that. And in fact, he's doing everything he can to just pretend like he cares. Like, he doesn't give a shit. He's increasing funding to fossil fuel industries. He's increasing productivity. He's buying pipelines. For God's sakes, he's invading First Nations people in order to drive a pipeline through their fucking land. Like, what is it going to take before Canadians start to recognize and realize that these liberals are criminal frauds? Like, this isn't a minor disagreement. This isn't even negligence, right? Like, there's something that you could put on the head of Stephen Harper. You could say that Stephen Harper was negligent. But you know what Stephen Harper didn't do? Stephen Harper didn't declare a climate emergency while simultaneously buying pipelines and increasing fossil fuel production and subsidizing the fossil fuel industry more. Harper didn't try to pretend as though he was a climate advocate while doing everything he could to make the climate crisis worse. That's what makes Trudeau a fraud and a criminal. That he is actively duplicitous. He is actively lying to us. He is worse than the Harper government is by a wide margin. It's not even close, in my view. I would rather have Stephen Harper in power today. I would rather have it be Stephen Harper in power today than these fucking Trudeau liberals. Without a doubt. And it's not even close in my view. It's not even fucking close at all. Because I would rather have a guy in power that was saying to me, like, yeah, I don't really care, than a guy in power who was saying, I absolutely care, while deceiving me completely. And I don't believe these NDPers. I think that they're just orange liberals. Like, maybe they are genuine in what they mean, but they're not. I don't think their policies are serious. Like, so what if they do it? So we'll all be, like, slightly more comfortable while the place burns down. Right? They're not going to, like, de-subsidize the fossil fuel industry. They're certainly not going to actually attempt to incarcerate any of these guys. Right? They're certainly not interested in any of that. Like, the NDPers are happy to just be NDPers. Like, I don't see a serious social movement here. Like, that's really what it comes down to. I don't see, like, Jagmeet Singh standing up and fucking, like, ringing a bell. Like, I don't see any of these NDPers giving a speech like someone from the film Don't Look Up. Like, I'm not seeing any of these guys rise to the moment. I'm seeing a lot of, like, Andrea Horvath, like, you know, we're going to take things more seriously as the NDP. Yeah. Yeah. Just, like, where's the crisis? Like, where's the fucking crisis? Where's any of these guys talking about this crisis as if it is actually a fucking crisis? And the reality is they don't give a shit. When they finish their job, like when they go into their office, right, and they send their emails and talk to whoever they're going to do, they go home to a nice cushy place, right? And they go to fucking sleep. Like, they don't give a fuck. Not really. They don't genuinely care. Like, why are these guys not organizing major protests? Like, why are these guys not getting into the streets? Why are these guys not galvanizing the public? Like, why are these guys not the guys that are surrounding the halls of power? Oh. Like, no, I don't believe them. I don't take them seriously. They're just incremental reformists. That's it. And you think the sun is going to give a shit about incremental reform? Like, you genuinely think that the dead that we vomited into the atmosphere through our fucking infernal machines, through this act of dark necromancy, are going to look at us and be like, oh, look, they're trying incremental reformism. That's really going to work. Yeah, that's really going to make it happen. Oh, we the dead are placated. Yeah, oh, the burning sun is really going to give a shit about that. Like, the equator is going to get burnt first. Like, it's going to go first. Here in Canada, the temperature is going up at double the speed than every place else. So you're looking at like let's. I'm feeling kind of mean, straight up. I'm feeling kind of mean, right? Ooh, Lytton. Yeah, Lytton. They knew what I wanted. Right, so there's Lytton. Lytton burnt down. And let's never forget, right? Lytton burnt down so fast that the fire trucks in the fire hall burnt down with him. They couldn't even get the fire trucks out of the fire hall. That's how fast Lytton burnt down. So it went up, just poof, and it was gone. So what's next, right? So this is one of the hottest places in Canada. See Kamloops? There's Kamloops right fucking there. Right? So what is it? Spence's Bridge is next. Logan Lake, Lower Nakoa, Merritt. If I'm living in any of these communities, I'm wondering if I'm the next Lytton. Is my community the next community to go because of the absolute criminal negligence and deception and lies of the Trudeau government? And the Horgan government, incidentally? Like, Lillooet, the Fountain Indian Reserve, right? All of these places. What's the next Lytton? Is it going to take Kamloops? What's the population of Kamloops? Almost 100,000 people. Right? Do you think the sun is going to stop? Do you think the burning sun is going to give a shit? Like, what reprieve do you think the people of Kamloops are going to get from the sun? From this incremental reformist bullshit? Do you think we'll start acting when 100,000 people are fleeing for their lives from a fire that they can't stop? Like, this is what we are talking about. And no, I don't think our political class is I certainly don't fucking think that the Liberals or the NDP give a shit. Take a look at fucking Horgan. Do you think Horgan gives a shit at all about that flooding that's going on? Right? This whole fucking area is flooded. Do you think he actually gives a shit? I don't think he does. Right? Like, I think he wants to look like he gives a shit so that he can get voted in again. But I don't think he actually cares. And how do I know that he doesn't actually care? Because for fucking a decade, the experts were saying, like, hey, this is a high-risk flood area and we're not doing anything to build infrastructure there. And Horgan didn't do shit about it because he doesn't give a fuck. Like, these guys don't give a fuck. Like, during the whole Fairy Creek shit, where was Horgan during any of that? Just shrugging off in the corner, right? Like, he's not coming out with big statements. He's not even coming out with statements of solidarity. He's not even doing anything at all, right? The invasion of Wet'suwet'en land is happening in British Columbia under Horgan, an NDPer. Like, the NDP do not give a fuck at all. Their grift is the same as the Liberals' grift. Look like you care. Do nothing important, and in fact, do everything you can to make the problem worse. But pretend like you care. And that seems to be good enough for Canadians. And so the question comes, when do we figure this grift out as a people? When do we actually genuinely figure this grift out? And is it going to happen when Kamloops is burnt to the ground? Probably not, honestly. Probably not. We'll all just be like, oh, wow, yeah, ooh, climate change getting to be a problem. Yep. That's it. That's the Canadian way. Right? That's the Canadian way. This is why it drives me crazy that Canadians, like, we all talk about how nice we are. Oh, sorry, bud. All that kind of fucking bullshit. It's total fucking bullshit. It's the Canadian way. Right? Be just as evil and just as supremacist and just as dark as the worst American you've ever met. Oh, but talk like this and be nice about it, eh? Oh, sorry, bud, eh? Oh yeah. Oh, well, what are you gonna do? That's our fucking social strategy. Act nice, be evil. Oh, Canada. Like, is it gonna be Kelowna? I wonder which one it's going to be. What's the population of Kelowna? So Kelowna's actually 100,000 people. Like, I should fucking start taking bets. Like, because we're not going to do anything about it. So, like, get prepared. And stop pretending like the political class is going to respond in any rational way, because they're not. They're not interested in that. That's not their game. Right? They don't give a fuck about these 100,000 people. They don't care. Like, they care that they have their cushy little office. Like, that's what they give a fuck about. They care that they get, oh, look at me. I'm the MPP for the riding of whoever is standing. Like, they don't fucking care. Like, they don't even respond to these emails. Like, if the people of fucking Lytton sent a bunch of emails to their MPP, it'd be some assistant that responds. Right? Like, they don't give a fuck. And I'm so, honestly, I'm actually kind of getting tired of it, that people keep coming in here and pretending like the NDP are going to solve anybody's problems. Like, they're just orange liberals. They don't give a fuck. They don't care. They just pretend like they care, because for Canadians, that's good enough. Like, so when Kamloops burns down, we're all just going to shrug and be like, oh, well, what are you going to do about it? And when the flooding continues and when the droughts come throughout Manitoba, right, there's a huge drought through this area that happened last year. Massive drought. It actually declined canola yields across the globe. Like, the encroachment of the desert system that is going to happen here. Like, the famines are going to be the worst part. Like, the famines are going to be the worst part, without a doubt. Like, the flooding is horrible. It's a massive tragedy. The burning down is horrible. That's the tragedy. Watching children starve is going to be the worst part, from my perspective. And we're just walking into it. We know it's coming. Like, it's impossible to ignore. And we, like, still go to work. Still vote Liberal, still vote Conservative, think the NDP give a fuck. Like, when we start to watch our kids starve, like when we start to watch our kids, like, have to eat less, right? Maybe then we'll grow up and realize that, oh, this has all been a grift. That this whole capitalist system is just a grift. Always has been, always will be. And that the system isn't designed to solve problems. The system is designed to maintain power. That's what the system is designed to do. And like is it going to be Prince Edward Island? Like, the water levels are coming up. Did you know that Prince Edward Island loses land every single year? That Prince Edward Island every single year loses land, that eventually it's going to be underwater, that it's almost a certainty that Prince Edward Island will be underwater. Like, let's what was it? Flooding, climate change flooding map. So let's go take a look. Let's go fucking take a look. I don't know why. Like, I'm suddenly in just like a fucking dark ass mood all of a sudden, straight up. Is this the map? This isn't the fucking map I want. Get the fuck out of here. There's a great map that I encountered, and all of a sudden I can't find it. Isn't that the way? Anyway, I don't give a shit anymore. Here, maybe. Is this it? Is this it? And like, here we go. So that's Thailand, right? Let's get on over to PEI. That's where I give a shit right now, for whatever reason. So water level, right? Let's put it in feet. Let's go crazy. All right. Prince Edward Island's actually better off than I thought it was going to be. So it's the red that's the problem. This shit goes up like 3 feet, let's say. So that's a meter. Oh yeah, actually not bad. Not bad. It must be cliffs, right? Shit like that. Yeah. That makes sense actually, given the landscape. Anyway. The worst part is all these things coming are going to make people worse than ever. The smaller pond makes the fish meaner. Yeah. I share your frustration, but it's wasted energy to complain about bourgeois electoral politics. Tigers don't change stripes. Systems will not change by voting. Yeah, we need to focus on building revolution. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. That's why I think it's important to get connected to the Extinction Rebellion. That's why I think it's important to get connected to movements and social things that are happening in your society in meaningful ways. That like... And it is just keep showing up and keep showing up and keep showing up. Like that's what it's going to take. And to attempt to build systems that exist outside of the current model. Right? Like eventually there just comes a point where the model no longer works. Right? Where like the system of global distribution, like China is closing off its borders, right? It doesn't want to get infected with COVID. The way that the fucking rest of the world has just sort of shrugged its shoulders and been like, yeah, okay, whatever. Right? And that's going to close down all kinds of supply chain issues. Close down all kinds of stuff. Right? Like, I'm of the opinion that we should take these golf courses over and, like, change them into gardens, change them into social housing. Like, fuck these golf courses. Like, who gives a fuck about these? Oh, it's the 10 rich cocksuckers. Like, get the fuck out of here. Like, leave it to capitalists to ruin something as simple as a walk. Right? You can't just, like, go for a walk in nature. You can't just, like, go into the ravines or go into the areas that you can't develop and just enjoy a nice walk through nature. No, you have to turn even a walk into a game. What the media thinks is important is so estranged from our everyday lives. Do people really care this much about January 6th? The January 6th moment is actually interesting. It is actually interesting because there is an underlying anxiety. Yeah, good walk spoiled, exactly. That's Mark Twain, I think. And was that Twain? Anyway. There's an underlying fear that exists in America that they are going to lose their democracy. And they are. Like, they already have. Like, that's the funny thing about it. Is that, like, there is no such thing as American democracy. There's a negotiation that happens between the oligarch class. Like, that certainly exists. But I wouldn't call that a democracy. The media obsession with January 6th, very much Russiagate all over. Well, the concern, of course, is that it's going to happen again. Right? That, like, I am of the opinion that, like, we need to surround the halls of power with a nonviolent, peaceful movement, a la Martin Luther King. Right? Like, the way that Martin Luther King was organizing things with a nonviolent protest movement and surrounding the halls of power and this sort of thing, right? That's effective. And And what they can do, of course, and what the media is interested in, is treating a movement that was doing that as the same as January 6th. Right? Like, that's the goal. And of course, there is just a concern that, like, and I would be concerned about it. Like, if a group of people had stormed the Parliament building and attempted to take over the Canadian Parliament, I'd be very concerned about it. And I'd be very concerned that the people who did that would be arrested. Like, I don't think that we should overthrow through violent revolution. I don't think that that's what we should be doing. We should be surrounding the halls of power and redrawing our constitution and just declaring this institution illegitimate. Because it is. Right? Because it is. And, like, because they're not going to let communists in. That's not going to happen. Right? They're going to do all kinds of stuff to make sure the communists don't get in. Like they did to Tim Buck. For God's sakes, they fucking straight up arrested Tim Buck and threw him into prison. Yeah, unlike Russiagate, I think January 6th happened, but the Dems don't really care about it. They want you to care about it. Yeah, and they don't want you to dig too deep into it. Because if you dig too deep into it, then you'll really see that, like, the Democrats, like, they're trying to pretend like it's a Republican-only thing. But it's not really. Like, the Democrats are just as interested in this sort of shit. If they cared about fascism, they'd do something. They can't even replace the guy Trump put in charge of the post office, for fuck's sakes. Yeah. Or, no, very simply, like, if they cared about stopping fascism, they'd stop funding it. Right? Like, that's the truth of it. If they cared about stopping fascism, they'd stop funding it. But they fund it. They actively fund it. They give money to fascist organizations. Like, they don't care about stopping fascism. Yeah, these people are going to protect us from fascism. Yeah, exactly. Like, it's a total joke. Like, it's a total fucking joke. And then you get, like, the whole eco-fascism part of it. Right? You get the whole eco-fascism side of it, which is like, oh, well, climate change is going to bring about a decline in the amount of resources we have access. So we've got to make sure that the right people get access to those resources, right? We got to make sure that it's the good white Christian Americans that get access to those resources, right? Like, what sucks the most is, like, we could have easily confronted this. Like, we genuinely could have. Like, back in the 80s, there was a environmental concern with aerosols, right? That a chemical agent was found in aerosol cans, like hairspray, literally. Think about, like, Peggy Bundy, right? Well, it was found that there was a chemical agent in these aerosol cans that was smashing holes in the ozone layer, right? Holes were appearing in the ozone layer. And climate scientists and environmentalists were like, yo, hole in the ozone layer. Like, that's a problem. And the politicians of that day went, yeah, we fucking agree. Like, we completely fucking agree. And they immediately passed legislation using the research given from experts to ban this chemical agent from use. And the holes in the ozone layer went away. Why? Because the Earth healed itself. Because the Earth is very capable of doing that. Because it's a much stronger and more powerful system than we are. By a lot. And so that shows you, like, imagine if, like, you know, Big Hairspray stood up and, like, bribed a bunch of politicians and they obstructed and got in the way and, oh, there isn't actually an issue and all this kind of, like, blah, 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 blah. And, like, But that didn't happen, right? The problem was observed. The experts said it was a problem. The politicians got together, solved the problem, and moved forward together, dealing with any of the negative consequences such that they existed as they occurred. And we could have done that. We could have very much done that. We could have acknowledged the reality of climate change. We could have acknowledged the science, right? Like, I remember I was first awakened to the reality of climate change because of Al Gore and the film Inconvenient Truth, right? And I thought as a kid that, okay, like, this is something we need to deal with. Let's go. Let's hustle, right? Like, let's go. There is absolutely no way that my teenage self ever believed at any moment that we would come to this point where a full half of the society, 50% of the society, is completely hell-bent on their own destruction and the destruction of the entire species. Like, under no circumstances did I think that was going to be the case. Like, I didn't think it was going to be literally 20 years later. And not only is the political power structure and the society attempting to destroy everything, they're simultaneously attempting to convince us that they actually care, when they overtly and obviously don't. Yeah, it's weird. Finally accepting you live in dark times and are likely going to do so for the rest of your life. Yeah. I thought things could improve 10 years ago, but we've missed so many off-ramps now. They took lead out of gasoline. That had multi-dimensional impacts on life at all levels. Like, and the changes that need to happen aren't even that drastic. Like, that's what's so fucking annoying about this conversation now. Like, we know who's polluting. We know where the pollution is coming from. We know what's going on, right? We're literally saying to, like, 10,000 people, tops, hey, maybe not so much with the private jets. Hey, maybe not so much with the rockets that you shoot into space. Hey, maybe this military adventurism is a bad idea. Right? And it's just like anything else. We're playing with fire. Like, we're talking about this as if we can manage it. Just like the way we talk about war. That we actually believe that we can manage it. It's not how it works. Like, the absurdity that is going to be unleashed because of our negligence and deception and duplicitous nature in regards to climate change is going to be like a wildfire. We are not going to control it. We're not going to be able to manage it. The chaos that is going to come out of it is going to be unmanageable by definition. And at this stage in the game, I think we can pretty clearly say that the political class is aware of it and that they're actively choosing abandonment. And so it really is just get yourself positioned to, like, deal with the abandonment. I sort of think to myself, like, why am I staying in Toronto, you know? Rent is so high. Like, if I were to move out of Toronto, I could probably find a place and actually afford it with the amount of income I'm getting now. And I look at the poor city of Toronto. Like, this place is hollowing out. Like, this place is hollowing out. That if you actually go for a walk through the city, it's empty. And they're doing everything they can because of the rising homelessness, because of the rising poverty. They're, like, removing benches. They're making the city more inhospitable, right? Everything is just supposed to be driven through. Like, And this city is just going to turn into a playground for the billionaire class. Like, that's it. It'll just be a bunch of fucking rich idiots just acting like this place is their playground. It's going to turn into like a real Sodom and Gomorrah sort of situation. And the result of Sodom and Gomorrah was that the city burnt to the ground. BioNTech made a profit of more than 7 billion euros in the first 3 quarters of last year alone. Yeah. Because that's all that matters now, is the worship of money. Right? Just worship money. It doesn't matter what's really happening in the real world. Right? Things like the environment, things like reality are externalities. Right? And they're very explicit about that. Like, that's how you know they've gone crazy. Like, that's how you know they've gone mad. Is that the world doesn't matter. The world itself is an externality. Right? Yeah, it is getting to the point where communist revolution is the only hope for the future. No alternative. Yeah. I mean, I espouse the surrounding of the halls of power, a redrawing of the Constitution. Like, we are going to have to get to the point where we erect an alternative model that straight up ignores these guys. And, like, just treat them as terrorists, because that's what they are. Right? Like they're not interest. Their interest is exclusively in the destruction of the species, exclusively. And like, a guy like Trudeau is outright bullshitting you, like straight up. Like, we need to increase fossil fuel production so that we can transition to a green economy. That's literally something that he has said. It's delusional, at best. Like, it's completely fucking delusional. You got a guy like Jeff Bezos saying, yeah, we need to send all of our polluting industry into space. It's delusional. The process of sending these polluting alternatives into space would destroy the planet. Like, we've truly entered the period of Nietzsche's Last Man, where we're so disconnected from reality. We're retreating into these like false digital hallucinations. We're following these absurdist ideologies. We've retreated into total spiritualism and tribalism. Like, reality no longer matters. Evidence no longer matters. I remember when Mao surrounded the halls of power, and through the power of his example, the ROC surrendered and retreated to Taiwan. Well, there does come a moment incisive where I have to recognize the limits of what I can do. Like, what you are leading us to gets me banned off this platform. That's the harsh reality. And I take a look at the example of Martin Luther King and the struggle that he put forward. And, like, it would be great if we had, like, military authority and military power, but we don't. Like, really. Like, Mao had military power. Like, Stalin and Lenin had military power. Like, we literally don't even have a country that's capable of acknowledging the existence of class consciousness. Like, we're essentially dead in terms of the class consciousness example, right? Like, we literally can't have a conversation about class. Like, we're not organized to do any of that. Yeah, you're right. Like, I'm not going to fight you on that. You're right. But, like, that's how desperate it's become. Like, it's become so desperate that it's people like me now. Like, there's a joke that I like to say to my dad, because every so often, because of what I'm doing, like, I've got a bit more understanding of how technology works. And so he says to me, hey, John, can I get your advice? And I say to him, oh, shit, we must be desperate. And yeah. Like, oh shit, we must be desperate. Yeah. No, I understand all of that. Like, truthfully, one of the things that I think, because every country is different, and one of the things that I really respect the Chinese communists for having done is they don't claim communism or socialism as their own, right? They haven't become fundamentalists in regards to how communism arose within their own nation. And part of the strength of the Chinese civilization, because you got to remember, when Mao was leading the Communist Party, like, China had been around for 4,000 years, right? There wasn't a question of unity within the country itself. That it really was a question of who is going to run this country. How is the country going to be run? Whereas here in North America, I do think that there is a major question of unity. I think that Western culture and Western civilization fosters chaos and disunity. And that it's very likely, in my view, that as this climate catastrophe unfolds, that the federated systems fail. And that they simply become ignored. And that the provinces and the states begin to fracture and break off. Because the legitimacy of the federated body no longer exists. Like, it is completely delegitimized as a prevalent system. And like, so this idea, in my view, that we're going to have like a revolution and take over the halls of power and all of that kind of stuff, well, I think that if that were to actually happen, given the disunity that our society and our culture has, that even doing that would fracture the society. And you would just have states and provinces that just wouldn't go along with it. Simply put, like, they just wouldn't go along with it. And like, when Mao takes over China, right? Like, there was a certain amount of unity that came with that. That he obviously had the support of the people. He obviously had support, and not 100% obviously, but he wasn't cobbling something together. Like, as you say, settler colonies first have to cobble together a country where there isn't really one. China and other civilization states don't face such identity crisis. Exactly. And I think that we can't, when it comes to the conversation of revolution, when it comes to that conversation, we can't actually look at China or even Russia as a guiding post for how revolution would look, because we're not a country. That's a hard reality to accept, but it's absolutely the truth. That we are not actually a civilization. We are not actually a country. We are a military exploration. We are the apex and we are the finishing of a military invasion that was erected on behalf of corporate power and monarchs. And now we are looking at one another and asking, why the fuck are we even here? What are we even doing? And what I can guarantee you is that should our country, if you want to call it that, face a legitimate crisis on the scale that we're talking about, it's not going to remain unified. The United States and Canada are going to balkanize. I don't think anything else can happen. I don't think that the federated bodies can maintain their credibility. I don't think they can maintain their authority. I don't think they can maintain the unity required, because the provinces and the states don't actually see themselves as the same people. That the Chinese people see themselves as the same people. That they have a built-in national identity that exists within the confines of China. No such thing exists. Like, the people from Quebec see themselves as different people from the people from British Columbia, who see themselves different from the people in Ontario, who see themselves different from the people of California, Texas, Louisiana, so on and so forth down the pipe. And as the crises get larger, and as the project of abandonment continues, right? As the abandonment continues, that should a revolutionary force come along and attempt to forcibly seize power in the manner that you suggest, a la Mao, I think many of these states and many of these provinces would see that as the death knell, and it would balkanize everything. It would not bring unity. It would not bring unity. That it would tear the country apart, as almost as a definition. And I don't think that the country can go any other way. Like, I don't see a path for Canada and the United States that remains unified. I really don't. Especially as the project of abandonment becomes obvious to many people and to many of these states. And many people begin asking very simple questions. Why am I paying taxes to these guys? Give me one actual reason. Like, if I'm living in the state of Texas and I am paying taxes to the federal government, why am I doing that? What do I actually get for that? And the answer is nothing. Well, you get little Palestinian skeleton corpses. You get a Ukrainian war, right? You get military adventurism across the planet, but you don't get anything else. And so it's not hard to figure out that, like, these guys are going to leave. The people of Texas or California or Arizona or any of these places, Manitoba, are just going to be like, oh, like, you're telling me if I declare my independence, we no longer have to pay 30% tax to the federal government? Oh, yeah. Sounds good to me. Like, 30% of the federal government for fucking nothing? Like, you get nothing for it. Like, here in Canada, you get, like, healthcare, right? But they're looking to privatize that anyway. So, like, if you implement a project of abandonment, then don't be too surprised if you get abandoned back. And I just don't think, like, if we created a vanguard party, a revolutionary communist party that had the objective of storming the halls of power and seizing the halls of power by force, the country would balkanize. Which I think incidentally happens anyway. It's just that would be the trigger event. Like, let's say another January 6th event happens, except it's successful. The country balkanizes. For sure. Like, what? You think the Republicans storm the halls of power, seize the federal body, and California is just like, oh, damn. I guess we're ruled by these guys now. Probably not. Like, probably not. And the truth, incisive, the truth is that communists can't provide that answer to national identity. The society is fractured. The society is fractured. Like, we're having actual questions. Like, we are having actual conversations in the public sector about whether or not everybody deserves food and shelter. Like, really, really contemplate this. Really, really, really contemplate this. What does it mean to be a person who believes that someone else should not have food and shelter? That is a divided nation. That is a nation bereft of civilization. That is a nation in name alone. We are not going into the future unified. And more importantly, and this I think is key for the left and for communists to understand, nothing we can do can actually unify this place. It's already broken. We're just waiting for it to fall apart. It's like in an anime or a cartoon when the guy goes like swoof with his sword, and then there's a pause, and then it starts to slide apart and fall. Well, we're here. And so the goal of a communist movement should be to rally the weak, rally the poor, rally the homeless, rally those who are impoverished, who have been abandoned, and gather together in solidarity and erect alternative systems to the degree with which we are capable. Because as the system falls apart, as the project of abandonment continues, we aren't going to have another alternative. Like, we simply cannot afford to live in this dream world that we are going to gather together the military force required to actually overwhelm the imperial core. It's not going to happen. Just isn't. Get to know your neighbors. Get to know the people around you. Go bake a tray of cookies. Send it around your neighborhood. Put your phone number and your website or your email in there. Tell these people who are around you right now that you are here to help them. Because as these crises continue, the people who are around you are the people who really matter. All right, guys. This got oddly somber. This episode got oddly somber, but such is the energy and such is the life that we live in. That we are here to stand in solidarity with one another and to seek the truth. To constantly seek the truth. And to live together in peace and solidarity as best as we can. So, sometimes you gotta walk into the mud a little. Always remember, each and every one of you is a quantum being living in quantum energy. These billionaires are spending hundreds of billions of dollars in the hope that you don't realize it or you don't accept it. Because then you'll be easier to enslave. Don't let them. Rebel. Revolt. Repent. Good luck. We're going to need it.